Hi, good evening. We're going to call this meeting of the Board of Education to order. If you could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the meeting agenda? Ms. Downey, is there a second? Ms. Hirsch? All those in favor of approving the meeting agenda? Ms. Kowalski?
Mayor Harry, the meeting agenda? Yes.
All right, that passes 7-0. Mr. Scherer absent. Next up is the consent agenda. Can we get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Ms. Downey, is there a second? Ms. Stowe? All those in favor of approving the consent agenda?
Karen? Aye.
Passes 7-0. Thank you. All right, so the next up is the school welcome. Mr. Feinstein.
Thanks for that rousing applause. I appreciate it. Thank you. So, good evening, Chairman Bernstein, members of the board, Dr. Jones and cabinet, and all in the audience. Welcome to the Western Middle School. I realize that very few of you tonight, well actually none of you tonight, came to hear me speak. But it's my mic and it's my school, so you have to put up with me for at least a few minutes. Before I start, I just want to introduce a few people. Lucas, you're the senior class president, right?
Yes.
Where'd you go to middle school?
I came to Western.
Yeah, you did. There you go. And Zane, you're like the student body president, right?
Oh, yeah.
And where'd you go to middle school?
West Side.
Yeah, you did. I'm getting a t-shirt cannon next year. Okay. So I should probably drop the mic right now, as there is no better endorsement for our school than these two fine gentlemen. But there are a few things I need to share, and like I said, it is my mic. So I avoid these board meetings like I avoid broccoli. I haven't seen you since you allowed us to adopt the Avid school-wide magnet theme about a year ago. So I figured this would be a good opportunity to provide you with an update on both the work and the results. So while on paper, Avid school-wide is a new theme for us, Avid is what we have been doing for years. It has permeated everything from our mission statement, to our grading practices, to our approach to discipline, to classroom instruction. As we understand that kids need to be explicitly taught executive functioning skills, we continue to run with a one-binder organizational system and are now directing our energy towards focused note-taking. In the classrooms, all students are using a common reading strategy to attack nonfiction text in a systemic way across content areas. Also this year, there has been an emphasis on questioning, using Costa's level of thinking to add rigor to questions being asked and answered. So for example, rather than asking kids to spit out the causes of the Revolutionary War, we now pose questions such as, was this war inevitable? Students use a variety of Avid strategies, such as philosophical chairs or a Socratic seminar, to debate and explore questions such as these in all disciplines. I think the one new addition that is reaping the most benefits for our students, though, and likely their least favorite, is our progress monitoring system. So every couple of days, students are provided time to check Aspen, record their grades and missing assignments, and then set goals or create a plan of attack to address any deficiencies. And every 8 days, this plan and this sheet is emailed home to the parents, and to the teachers, and to the guidance counselor, and if appropriate to a coach. So we know how your child is doing, the child knows how they're doing, and the parent knows how they're doing all the time. You can run, you cannot hide. So when you put the Avid system into the hands of the most dedicated, caring, and professional staff I've ever worked with, you get results. While your child is much more than a score on a standardized test, Western is much more than a collection of those student scores. That being said, these results do tell a story. In terms of absolute scores, Western has leapfrogged over 60 middle schools, that's 60 middle schools, in the past 5 years. We are now the #1 scoring true public school in the state with a free and reduced lunch population over 40%. No school who scores better than us looks like us. In fact, we outscore many schools whose idea of diversity is a cadet in the back of the room. This growth crosses economic, racial, and language lines. It has resulted in a steady but significant reduction in the poverty achievement gap each of the past 5 years. Currently, in math, the state index gap for kids in poverty at Western is 12.5. The state average is 22.3. We're almost half of that. And in reading, our number is even more impressive. Our gap lies at just 4.9. The state average is 16.5. Just 5 years ago, our achievement gap exceeded that of the states. It is also important to note we have closed this gap while raising scores for all kids and having an increase in our number of special ed students, ELL population, and students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. But I want to be clear, the work we're doing at Western does much more than simply service our neediest children. AVID is good for all kids, which is why we push for this as our theme. Yes, we have enjoyed a significant decrease in the percentage of students scoring at the lowest level on the SBA. But we have seen an equally sharp rise in the percentage scoring at the highest levels at the same time. This is due to the work of our outstanding staff, the AVID system, so all children can flourish at Western. Others have begun to take note. We are a magnet school, with the idea that we will draw students not fortunate enough to attend one of our feeder elementary schools. We're doing just that. As of yesterday, we had 25 magnet applications for Western, 20 of which are for our rising 6th grade class. This will bring our total for the 2021 school year to 45 magnet students. And as a reminder, you guys, that in our previous team, we had a total of 4 magnet students. And one was my own kid, so easy to count. So we want to thank you for your continued support of AVID school-wide. It's making a difference in the lives of kids. So finally, a word about our field. I suspect that many in this crowd tonight are here to voice your thoughts on how to best surface the fields at Central. I want to remind all of you that your debate is a luxury we at Western do not enjoy. We are now in our fourth year of not having our fields open. At the glacial pace with which this is moving through the system, I fear that our fields, whenever open, might be named the Gordon Bryson Memorial Fields. I was really hoping to see the kids play on the fields. I did not want to be part of its landfill. But in all seriousness, for 3+ years, we have done what has been asked and have allowed the process to unfold without interference. Enough. Our kids deserve better. I was encouraged by the discussion that took place at the board meeting a few weeks back. I could hear a sense of urgency to finally get this work done. As we debate the high school and Central, both of whom have had access to their fields this entire time, I ask you to remember the cohorts of kids at Western who have never set foot on home turf. Thank you and enjoy your meeting.
Thank you, Gordon. You always get the applause on the back end.
Oh, that works?
Yeah, that works. It does. All right, next up, we're going to go to our public hearing portion. We'll start with the GHS student government.
Good evening, members of the board, the cabinet, Superintendent Jones, and community members. I'm Lucas Gazianis. I'm the senior class president at Greenwich High School. Let me first say that I'm thrilled to be back here at Western, of which I am a proud alumnus, and so is Zane. So thank you to Mr. Beinstein and the faculty at Western for having us and for running the best middle school in town. So let me begin with a student government update. In March, we'll be hosting a Club Spotlight Week, where student groups will have the opportunity to apply to sponsor a day of the week. We're letting them put together their own proposals for what that will exactly entail, but we're expecting to have a diverse array of exciting ideas and activities to work with. I have also been leading a policy proposal in a student government subcommittee aimed at optimizing GHS's graduation ceremony for the classes of 2024 and beyond to comply with input we've been hearing from students. Through extensive discussions with many students, through student government and through a club I run, we found that students are dissatisfied with who is speaking at their graduation. They do not want to hear speeches that are often repetitive from as many class salutatorians as they usually do, but they still want to recognize their classmates' academic achievements. Our proposal would cause a top-ranked group of students to be recognized at the ceremony, but would only delegate speeches to one valedictorian and one salutatorian. This also maintains the accuracy of the titles, which are traditionally awarded to only the first and second-ranked students in the class. We're meeting with administrators soon to refine the proposal and hope to have it in front of the student government representative body shortly. And we're also exploring potential ways to address teacher grading disparities, which I'll have updates on in later months. Finally, this is the last time I will see you all before our SRO senior show on Thursday, March 5th and Friday, March 6th. Rehearsals have been underway since before February break, and I, for one, am very pleased with my progress in learning the TikTok dances that the show demands. We have memorable skits, a dynamic roster of musicians, including me on piano, and an amazing class spirit that you'll be able to feel from the audience. So please support the senior class and come see SRO. Thank you, that's all I have this month, and please welcome Student Body President Zane Cotter.
Thank you very much, Lucas. Mr. Chairman, Dr. Jones, members of the board, administrators, parents, cabinet, and pioneering citizens of Greenwich. Yeah, you like pioneering? Good evening and welcome. I am Zane Cotter, the student body president of Greenwich High School, and it is good to be back home at Western. I'd like to start by briefly notifying the greater Greenwich community on the very persistent issue of trash in the student center. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the situation, allow me to fill you in. The Student Center is the massive concourse at the high school that all the houses are connected to. And every day from 11:19 a.m. to 12:49 p.m., students from all around the school travel to the Student Center in 4 different waves to eat lunch, with a 10-minute overlap period in between waves. And while many students understand what it means to clean up after yourself, a large amount of students do not. And that large amount of students will eat their lunch and then push their plastic plates into the middle of the table and then just leave it there and go about on their business. And so as you might imagine, the result of that happening on a daily basis is an incredibly dirty student center, which is really surprising considering all of the trash cans that are scattered around. In fact, the issue is so persistent that I was able to Google student center trash and found an article on Greenwich Times from 5 years ago regarding the issue as the first result of that search. And while I have my own would-be solutions, like removing all of the tables for a day and seeing what would happen, or just having the custodians just not clean up the trash, I think the overall issue of trash warrants a further discussion on a larger scale about respect for schools and the overall community. The second point that I'd like to bring up is with regards to the achievement of a goal within our vision of the graduate. The last academic capacity refers to students being able to generate innovative, creative ideas and products. And in all honesty, I think we as a district have a bit of work to do on that account. While innovation is certainly a great focus in earlier years, by the time students are seniors at the high school, the focus shifts to memorization and application, which is not necessarily innovation. If curriculum is solely focused on learning about what has already been done in a particular field, then there is no room for students to be given the space and time to develop their own new and original ideas. And that diminishes their natural entrepreneurial spirit. As we're seeing with the computer science course proposal tonight, ambitious students are suddenly plowing through the available coursework earlier and earlier. And as a result, they're running out of courses to take as upperclassmen. So perhaps then, these students should be offered an innovation-driven seminar course where they can put their coding skills to use trying to create an original program for real-world application as an option for what they could be taking after completing the highest level class in that subject. The emphasis then, in that example, is not on regurgitating information, but instead on using what was learned to create something truly authentic through an entrepreneurial lens. If students fail in their pursuit to create that program, then that's okay. In fact, it should be encouraged. Students should learn that as potential young entrepreneurs, failure is a part of the learning process. It shouldn't be avoided or discouraged with bad grades. The point is, though, that the student would have the opportunity to learn through experience, which is something that I think curriculum now currently lacks. As valuable as it is to learn through the acquisition of knowledge from textbooks, it is equally as important to practice work-based learning as a means to boost employability and student ambition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, the next speaker is Carol Sutton from the GEA.
Good evening, Principal Weinstein, Chairman Bernstein, and board members. Hello, Megan. Superintendent Jones and Cabinet, and members of the community, and especially members of the Greenwich Education Association who are here today. I'm proud to represent these individuals and a total of 900 members of the association. Starting on a positive note, since your last meeting, 6 Greenwich schools were recognized as schools of distinction by the state of Connecticut. GEA is proud of all of our schools, but especially proud of North Mianus, Glenville, Julian Curtis, North Street, Parkway, and Riverside. They were recognized for progress, for performance, and also for growth, and we're very proud, and congratulations to all. Also, Mr. Weinstein, congratulations on the progress of your AVID program here at Western. It's really remarkable, and thanks to your leadership. So this evening I will speak on one agenda item. The special education report before you this evening asks and answers the question, is Greenwich providing the federal IDEA services to students with disabilities that are compliant with requirements, effective in meeting the requirements, efficient in the delivery of services, and sufficient quality to meet the individual needs of each student. The packet presented before you supports and puts out a resounding yes. Yet, when teachers speak freely, the picture is drastically different. One teacher said, quote, "We have outstanding staff working in the special education department, but we are understaffed. Most days it feels like we're being sent to sea in a leaky boat and then being punished for not bailing fast enough. That the boat floats at all is astonishing, considering that in the past 5 years, the number of students receiving special education services has gone up by 200. Yet, only 2 additional teachers and 3.3 additional instructional aides have been added to the head count. This does not add up. It cannot add up to compliant, effective, and efficient delivery of services, despite and regardless of the tremendous professional efforts of everyone involved, including special education teachers, regular education teachers, administrators, all the way up to the Office of Mary Ford, instructional aides, and of course the students themselves. The special education department is understaffed. It is stretched thin. And the impact of this is felt by every student and every teacher in every classroom in this great district. But this is not just about special education. In addition to greater numbers of identified students requiring services, kids without IEPs, without 504s, are walking into school each day with social, emotional, psychological, psychiatric, and behavioral issues that are new in scope and in volume. And they are often not diagnosed or classified for extra services of any kind or extra support. This is the reality all over town. It is not an east side, west side, backcountry, or central Greenwich issue, but rather a unifying challenge for our entire community. If you ask them, Teachers from all levels will tell you that the classroom of today is not the same as it was 10 years ago. Today, there are instances of dysregulated behavior and disrupted learning and emotional stress occurring daily. This new reality has not and cannot be absorbed with budget caps of 2% per year and flat staffing year over year. This is the reality of the past decade of budget cycles. This does not add up either, and it is unsustainable. And in fact, yesterday, the budget was frozen for this school year. No more supplies, no advance warning. Yes, teachers are, literally or metaphorically, sobbing in the parking lot because they're having a hard time doing the one thing that matters most to them, and that is meeting the needs of the students and guiding them to success. During the public hearing this evening, 3 GEA members, Barbara Friedman from Greenwich High School, Andrea Abbott from North Street School, and Maria Jukic from Central Middle School, will share more of the teacher perspective. When they speak, they're speaking as representatives of the association, not as individuals. So, as always, I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak, and we are looking forward to the discussion, to the hearing, and to the rest of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is PTA Council.
Good evening, Superintendent Jones, Principal Weinstein, Chairman Bernstein, members of the board, cabinet, and community. My name is Cricket Diamond, and I am the president of Greenwich PTA Council. We hope you all had a productive and restful break and have returned with energy and enthusiasm. Tonight, we would like to comment on a few agenda items and non-agenda items, and also give you a sense of the exciting committee work that is being done by council committees. To turf or not to turf? You will vote this evening on the fields for Central Middle School. While the CMS PTA has not taken an official vote regarding the fields, we know that the PTA has heard from many parents and staff members on both sides of the issue. The CMS PTA as an entity cannot choose a side in this matter as the community is extremely divided. They have encouraged all to come to the meeting this evening to express their thoughts. The ironic thing, as Gordon mentioned earlier about this location, is that Western Middle School has not had a field for the children to play on for 4 years. From what I hear from the parents here, they would just like a field, any kind of field. Regarding the special education program report presented tonight, PTA Council underscores many of the issues presented by Ms. Ford. We are concerned with large numbers of students being referred to special education because of trouble with attention and behavior. While the data is not available to determine actual numbers, the high percentage of reading referrals for middle and high school students is extremely worrisome. Is there a reason these issues were not detected earlier? Also, students are being referred for math at a rising rate, but our district has no math intervention in place similar to Orton-Gillingham. We support researching the staffing model for successful learning. Focus and funding should be directed to special education, and this includes infrastructure and training, as well as parent communication. Council supports the Board of Education request for an in-depth review of special education services in Greenwich to be completed during the 2021 school year. We look forward to the review as well as the work of the Key to Ed Devising Seminar Task Force, which will shed light on areas of concern with special education in Greenwich. Following up from the earlier screen time report from last month, PTA Council urges the board and the administration to consider a more holistic view of digital learning and the many concerns that have been raised by parents, including health aspects relating to eyes, posture, social development, and brain development, demonstration of efficacy, misuse of iPads and laptops, lack of screen time guidelines and parental and teacher monitoring tools, and availability of alternative learning paths. Given the scarcity of conclusive research in many of these areas, it is easy to argue that this is an experiment in digital learning. As such, parents should be provided with frequent updates about the overall digital learning picture and about their specific student. We implore you to provide future updates addressing all aspects of this topic. Before we close, we wanted to provide a quick update on PTA Council committee efforts. PTAC coordinates and leads over 14 committees comprised of parents, teachers, and administration from across the district. These committees seek to harness the energy and best practices to positively enrich and benefit our children. Tonight, we will highlight just a few of the many efforts, but what unites them all is the dedication of the countless individuals who work side by side on behalf of the students. The Wellness Committee has made great strides in recommending healthy school food choices with many more fresh and prepared on-site options available. Healthier eating leads to healthier children and better learning. In addition, they are focusing on posture awareness as well as an anti-vaping awareness too. The Afters Committee is helping PTAs of elementary schools across the district offer after and before school enrichment in areas from soccer to Spanish to science for thousands of students. Tasked with coordinating across all of the schools, our Curriculum Enrichment Committee is working to implement high-quality arts and education programming provided by the best external organizations available to our students. The committee's mission is to support, engage, and deepen the curricular goals and objectives and priorities brought to our students from the district. The ALP 2E Special Education Committees have been ensuring support for and focus on important issues. They have sponsored speaker series and parent education meetings, and they have worked with administrators on focused goals. Great momentum and great impact. We look forward to sharing many more examples of impact in future meetings. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. And so we are up to our community comment portion. We've got 30 speakers signed up. Each speaker gets 3 minutes. I don't know if any of you are math majors, but it's a lot of speakers there behind us. We have obviously a heavy agenda that we want to get to. What I would ask is a couple of things. One, please be respectful in your comments. Two, if somebody said something that you want to say, you can get up and say thank you, somebody already said it, and help us get the meeting moving. Because we really do want to get to the discussion portion. We also want to hear from you. So with that, I'll start with Barbara Friedman, followed by Andrea Abbott.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Barbara Friedman. Thank you, Board of Education, for this opportunity, and thank you, GEA, for inviting me to participate and speak on behalf of my colleagues. I teach electronic music composition and studio production at the high school, an internationally recognized program. I have a PhD in learning technologies, and I am an Oxford University Press best-selling author. After teaching for 24 years, I have considerable training and experience working with many kinds of students, including honors and AP students, and approximately 20% of my students have a variety of special needs. Last fall, the GEA started looking at special education and its impact on our schools. I freely admit that I'm no expert on elementary education, but what I have learned from my elementary colleagues in the last 5 months has shocked me. I didn't know what an evacuation was. In my wildest dreams, I could not imagine that elementary teachers need to empty or evacuate a classroom because of a student's emotional or physical breakdown. A single teacher can't serve that student alone while serving all the others. I learned in the past 2 years there were over 1,000 evacuations and major disruptions of instruction in our elementary schools. How many hours of lost instructions does that represent? Not to mention the emotional anguish for all our students. I was also shocked to learn that unwanted physical contact by students and assaults on my colleagues occur regularly. I saw the wounds, including bruises, scratches, and bites. In our survey of the school, well over 1,000 hours of mandated service hours were not and are not provided because special education teachers are stretched too thin. One teacher reported, quote, "The specific accommodation required on my caseload are impossible to implement in any given week. There are not enough hours in the day. Quite simply, this district fails to provide mandated service hours to our students." And finally, most shocking is that my colleagues are often afraid to speak up on these issues. In every school, faculty and staff reported they were either explicitly or implicitly discouraged from speaking up. They are afraid that the administration will somehow retaliate against them for speaking the truth and standing up for their students. In fact, I'm speaking tonight because my elementary colleagues are afraid to speak about these issues. Unaddressed issues do not solve themselves, they fester. After years of budget cuts and trying to solve this problem through fancy calculations on a spreadsheet, the number of underserved students has grown exponentially. In closing, my biggest takeaway is that my elementary colleagues are remarkable to accomplish as much as they do under the circumstances that they face every day. I implore you,
3 minutes,
members of the
time.
Board of Education, be our partners and fight for appropriate funding and staffing
Thank you
to
very
properly
much.
serve all of our students.
Thank you. Next is Andrea Abbott, followed by Maria Yukich. I would ask that you please try to keep that limited so that we can keep moving, because obviously we have more speakers.
Good evening. I'm Andrea Abbott, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to you this evening about our schools. And thank you to the GEA for inviting me to represent my colleagues in our secondary schools. I've taught 4th grade in the Greenwich Public Schools for 28 years. Most of those have been spent at North Street. I am also fortunate to reside in Greenwich. In total, I have lived here for 53 years. My daughter grew up in town and attended Glenville, Western Middle School, gay, and Greenwich High School as a member of the class of 2004. This history has given me a deep appreciation for the Greenwich Public Schools, but there is reason to be concerned. There are obstacles preventing our secondary educators from reaching every single student. Unlike the elementary schools, secondary schools have a continuum of services. Even with this variety of programs, though, the needs of the secondary students are not consistently met. For instance, the high school's Education and Wellness Center opened with fanfare this fall without sufficient staffing to provide required classes to its students. Our secondary schools are also struggling with inclusion. Because of the district's tracking practices, students with learning differences and behavior problems end up in classes together. One educator shared how all 21 students in her class had learning differences, which is the antithesis of inclusion. This teacher must manage intellectual disabilities, emotional disabilities, and students with behavior challenges complicated by OCD and ADHD. There is only one paraprofessional in this class, and the para is assigned to support one specific student. I quote, "There are not enough teachers or special education teachers at GHS to ensure that our students will excel in this learning environment. The 3 minutes I have tonight are not nearly enough to address all the hurdles in the middle schools and the high school. Other issues include extreme student behaviors that carry over from elementary school, inability to revise staffing when there are mid-year changes in student needs, insufficient staffing to provide mandated services, and the loss of paras and overcrowding in the academic labs, along with lack of support from some building administrators when dealing with student discipline. Instead of, how can I help, they hear, what did you do? The frustration secondary educators feel is understandable. They are expected to do more with less. There is no way to get what is expected to be done in this environment. Our students deserve better. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so it's Maria Yukich followed by Nancy Tarantino.
Good evening. My name is Maria Yukich, and I have been an English language arts teacher at Central Middle School for 10 years. And before that, I was a paraprofessional at CMS for 4 years. I have lived in Greenwich for 19 years. Both of my children are products of the Greenwich Public School system, and both are currently teaching in the district. To say our family is fully invested in the community is an understatement. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I welcome the chance to speak on behalf of my GEA colleagues. You have heard the teacher's perspective from Carol, Barbara, and Andrea. I will end with this question. Where do we go from here? How can we address what one of my colleagues called a crisis situation in our schools? The answer is we need to look beyond the award-winning school system that exists in headlines and face the new reality head-on. We have increasing numbers of identified special education students without corresponding increases in staffing. We have increasing numbers of students coming to schools with unregulated behavior and emotional distress, without corresponding increases in staffing or specialized training for teachers. We do not have robust programming options at all levels. The BET and RTM impose budget constraints that have turned school funding into a zero-sum game that nobody wins. To address the new reality, GEA believes that the following are worth fighting for. First, appropriate staffing to meet the needs of all students, including more instructional aides. Second, appropriate and meaningful staff development. Our teachers, administrators, and instructional aides need to be able to identify and address the emotional and psychological conditions that their students bring to school every day. Third, a continuum of services at all levels, properly staffed. At the elementary level, there are only 2 options for students, in or outplaced. There have to be other options for the kids in our schools. Fourth, a professional culture in which teachers are able to speak to the needs of their children without the
30
fear
seconds.
of retaliation or blame. Finally, a community commitment to acknowledging and addressing these issues for the success of all. We need you, the board, to acknowledge the new reality and to work with us and the entire community to create schools where every child can learn and grow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, the next speaker is Nancy Tarantino. Nancy Tarantino followed by Phil Tarantino.
So we're standing together because it's the similar, ideas. Good evening. I'm a physical education teacher at Central Middle School and a parent of 3 children in the Greenwich Public School system. As a 20-year physical education teacher in the town of Greenwich, improving Central Middle School fields is important to me. After teaching at Eastern Middle School for 15 years, I decided to transfer to Central. I had heard about the field conditions at Central through the sports program and the consistent need for cancellations while teaching at Eastern. When I arrived at Central, I believed it really couldn't be that bad. I was wrong, it was worse. Anytime there is any precipitation on the field, it becomes unusable. As a veteran PE teacher, I'm often forced to modify units and lessons because of weather conditions. Usually it would be a 1 to 2 day inconvenience. However, at Central, because of the poor field conditions, what should be a few days of poor weather will become a week of poor, unusable field conditions. The inconsistency in delivery of the curriculum is unfair to the student body at Central. As a physical education department, we see every student in the entire school in a 2-day cycle. When field conditions impact our lessons, we are creative and innovative in our curriculum delivery. We consistently use the tennis courts as a teaching station to accommodate our 580 plus students. Is it a solution? Yes. Should it be an acceptable place to deliver, for instance, a flag football unit? No. Not when there is a field right on our campus that we should be using. Why, as a community, have we accepted this as the norm? After listening to the proposed options at the previous Board of Ed meeting, we need to install artificial turf. We utilize the field from 8 to 2:45 every day for PE classes, and sports teams just from Central use the field from 3 to 5. This puts the field usage well above the 25-hour maximum to maintain the engineered grass option. Keeping people off the field outside of school hours is just unrealistic. An option that was proposed was to put a tarp on the field. This would have to be done by Park and Rec in a timely manner every time there was any rain in the forecast. In addition to weather-related curriculum interruptions, there's also maintenance interruptions. Often during the day, the field is being seeded, aerated, lined, etc., and we have to alter instruction to accommodate the very important job of maintaining the field. Not only is this an interruption to instruction, but also a cost that would not be necessary if the field had artificial turf. The engineered grass option also poses an additional issue with a loss of a teaching space for close to a year.
30 seconds.
From installing to waiting for the seed to root. Additionally, sports teams would have to be bused for every practice and game, adding another hidden cost. By adding artificial turf, we're gaining a teaching space, a space for sports programs, recess, and outdoor education space, and all would have year-round possibilities. A large usable space creates more activity time and accommodates our active student body. My hope is the field will become a state-of-the-art facility that supports the amazing student body at Central.
Thank you. The next speaker is Phil Tarantino, followed by Carl Higby.
Good evening. I'm here for one specific reason, and that's for the kids in our community. I'm here for what I believe the town needs. I'm the sports director at Western Middle School. I've lived in Greenwich my whole life. I've gone to Central Middle School. I'm the former Greenwich High School baseball coach, and I coach football in this town. I currently help out with youth football in town, and I see what the kids have as their challenges. Being at Western Middle School, we have not had fields for 4 years, and I see what that impact means. Having 2 middle school fields closed for a year makes no sense to me. In addition, the fact that we would spend $1 million on a field that was just stated can't hold 25 hours of use. Now we're looking at multiple years with 2 schools with no fields. Where are kids going to go? Where are they going to play? Michael wanted to stand with me as a student at Central Middle School who for 3 years has had issues just getting on a field to play. The students deserve better at Central Middle School for not only PE class but their sports. So if option 1 doesn't work, why would we throw away $1 million of our town's money? It just doesn't make sense to me. Secondly, there's turf fields everywhere in Greenwich. Greenwich High School, Sacred Heart, Greenwich Country Day, Brunswick, Cascade Park. Ready for this? The Greenwich Boys and Girls Club has turf. Almost every town in Connecticut has turf. North Haven Middle School just put in turf. Fairfield Middle School has a turf. Norwalk Middle School has a turf, which we play high school baseball on. Middle school sports teams play there. In addition, there's all college teams and every, you name it, lacrosse, soccer, football, they play on turf. NFL teams play on turf. I coach in the GYFL. It's ages 8 to 14. Guess where we play? You guessed it, on turf. And these are kids rolling around on turf. But I found out something today that was so interesting. Do you know that Cardinal Stadium, the turf that they just put in? There is not crumb rubber. It is called Envirofill, I apologize. So it's already in Cardinal Stadium, and that's what they would use. It is not crumb rubber, which I thought was really interesting. By the way, Central Middle School sports teams, they're already playing on turf, not only against the private schools that I stated, but they play at Cascade Park against Western. That is our home field, Cascade Park. So every team that we have at Western, other than field hockey, which plays at Pembroke, we go to Cascade Park to play. This past season, we played a field hockey championship game there. It was amazing. It went into 3 overtimes. The kids played and worked so hard. our coaches here who did a wonderful job. We had to stop the game and modify the ending because
30 seconds.
the Greenwich High School freshman soccer team had their game, and they were kind enough to wait an additional 45 minutes for it to end. And you know what the parents came up to me and after the game, you know what they said? Why aren't there more fields for our kids? And I just said, I think we're working on it. I am here because I passionately believe that our kids, the Central Middle School kids, the community, deserves fields that are the best. It is Greenwich.
3 minutes, time.
Board of Ed members,
Thank you
this is
very
your
much.
opportunity to make a major impact in our community. We really, really need it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next speaker is Carl Higbee, followed by Mike Mora.
Hey folks, Carl Higbee, RTM district in Central Middle School. So I thought I'd come up here and tell everybody, I hate government spending, so if I'm advocating for it, just please hear me out. The people who are protesting turf, that's my sector here, is to debunk you. Okay, there has never, ever, 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 ever been a NFL or professional sports team environmental risk or hazard or any type of illness related to turf ever settled or won. Okay, take that out. You don't care about the kids. That's not what you're doing. This is about kids having a place to practice. So when you people tell me that this is environmentally not friendly, that you're worried about the risk and health benefits to our children, hogwash. So the people that just put their names in an op-ed, Ellen Wolfson, Jude Bronstein, Warren Silver, Leanne Tell, Brian Tooney, and a couple other people, you're the main opposition. You put your name in an op-ed saying you don't like this. You all live within a 9-iron distance to that field. You don't care about the kids. You're there trying to call people out to not put a turf field in there because you don't want to lose your personal backyard. And that's incredibly disingenuous. It's sad. It's dishonest and disgusting. Okay? So you want to do something for the kids. If you're honestly for the children, I want to see you raise all the money to tear up all the turf fields all over Greenwich. Okay? Put grass fields back in there. That would be solving the problem. And if you tell me, oh, it's still for the environment, most of you people on that list I read drive V8 trucks. Okay? Turf. Do it.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mike Mora, followed by Mike Patrone. We have a speaker. Thank you. He's done. Mike Mora, please.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Mike Mora. I'm speaking here today as a teacher in the Greenwich Public Schools for 19 years, the former Greenwich High School baseball coach for 16 years, a camp owner who rents space from the town of Greenwich each summer since 2002, a volunteer coach with Coach Tarantino for the Crushers and Cal Ripken, and a parent of a CMS student. You could say I'm vested in the youth of this town. I'm in favor of turfing the whole Central Middle School field for the following reasons. Practice time is important for the school sports teams, and the fields are closed at an alarming rate due to poor grass field drainage, and from what I have been told by Parks and Recreation officials, lack of staffing to maintain grass fields properly. I was told that as a Greenwich High School coach. As the former coach, I have consistently seen our team struggle at the beginning of the season when the Greenwich High School baseball field is not yet opened. We have to try it in the gym many times. And then come on strong at the end of the season when we get use of our home field, which has a batting cage. The times that we don't get to practice on our field, we practice at Julian Curtis, which is the JV field, so their practice gets canceled, and there's no batting cage there. So if we want to hit, we just have 15 kids in the field, and we throw to one kid at a time. Not very efficient. We did fundraise. The Greenwich Athletic Foundation, thank you, and our great Diamond Club fundraised to get a batting cage there, but a neighbor complained because of the noise of a baseball bat on a ball would make, and the project was shut down. So therefore, there's no batting cage, and our kids don't get to do that. So my point is, because I have other ones, but they've already been stated, is that we need to stop listening to the voices of a few for their own backyard parks and stand up and say, we need to do things for our kids. Those are schools. Those are schools, not parks. Julian Curtis is a school. Central Middle School is a school. It is not a park. And I think what Carl was talking about was being used just by the people that live around there. And I do live down the street, and I want to turf. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right. The next speaker is Mike Petrone, followed by David McLean. I'm probably mispronouncing your name.
Good evening. I'm Mike Petrone. I'm the father, current coach for Cal Ripken in Thunder Baseball, GYFL, a recently retired RTM member. That's why I'm smiling. Look, we've been talking about the inadequacy of fields in this town for a very, very long time. We all know, simple, the demand for field time for youth sports in this town way exceeds the availability of fields, right? And that means we have a young, vibrant, athletic population in this town of residents and of taxpayers, which is a really good thing. But we also know that the population of the town is aging, and we must do whatever we can to ensure that we are able to appeal to young families to want to move here and invest in Greenwich. Adequate, available fields for their kids to play on is a priority. Now, frankly, as a coach for travel baseball, I'm a little embarrassed the number of times that I have to apologize for the condition of our fields in town when I'm hosting out-of-town travel teams. I've lost count how many times I've heard coaches from other teams come and say to me, wow, this is Greenwich? I would have expected a heck of a lot more in Greenwich. I'm also tired of hearing from my own parents when we travel out of town to play in other fields saying, wow, why can't Greenwich have this? You know, I'm not talking about towns like Darien and New Canaan and Westford. I'm talking about the Mamaronicks, the Portchesters, the White Plains, and the Palms. Okay? So now, it's unfortunate that it took so long to address the Central Field situation. And there are some folks here tonight who are opposed to even funding this study that's leading into this discussion. By not proactively addressing the CMS field condition, thousands of CMS students paid the price by not being able to enjoy the same basic outdoor curriculum and after-school activities that some of their peers in other schools have. Now, this is your time to be bold, Board of Ed, and make up for the poor stewardship of the past and start to give back to the children of this town. A grass field at Central may help to even the playing field, no pun intended, for the CMS students, but we can do better than that, okay? We can start tipping the scales and creating more opportunities for all the young athletes in this town, regardless of where they go to school. The only way to do that is to install a synthetic turf playing surface, which will yield 3 times the playable hours of a grass field. Now granted, this is far from a silver bullet for our field hours problem, and more steps are needed. But this is the most important step, because this is the first step. Well, thank you very much, and I respectfully ask you to vote and support full synthetic turf. Thank you.
All right, so the next speaker is David Langhorne, followed by Don Casa Massima.
Good evening. I'm here, most of you probably have no idea who I am, but that's perfectly okay, and we'd like to keep it that way. A couple of things that I noticed so far. We've had a lot of committees, we've had subcommittees, meetings, associations, groups. We're all going to gang together and get something done. I'm my 4th year. My second child's coming through Western Middle School without any hope of seeing a field. So graduated in May. My oldest son's had 2 years on the fields, and remarkably he survived. I'm amazed. I don't know how he lived, but he did. I have a 3rd son who'll be coming through starting this year here. I'm hopeful that he'll survive the same school project that he had before from the fields. It is unbelievable, unconscionable that these fields are still closed. I stood at the meeting, I wasn't allowed to ask any questions, they shoved me into the gym, and you can have one-on-one questions. Yep, we're on it, we got a guy, we got this guy, we got that guy, we got this guy, everybody's got their hands in their back pockets, take your money. Meanwhile, we got nothing. On a completely serious note, the Teachers Association lady came up here. She's talking about all the kids that are all sorts of jammed up at school. Misbehavior, stabbing, biting, chewing, not reading, not writing, not doing the mathematics. How about you get your ass outside and do some work? Have some fun. But you can't go outside, because some gadfly came here and said the kids are going to die. I asked a simple question when I was here last time. Has anybody done the research on the 50 years of kids that played on those fields? Of course not. Not one of them's dead. It's ridiculous that we're still doing this 4 years later. As for Central, the whole school's an embarrassment. The building's falling down, it looks like a hellhole, everything's dark, the trees are everywhere, and the fields look like crap. It's unbelievable that we all sit here in our suits and ties, all snazzy and cool, over $3 million. Come on. Someone has to make a decision and say, go. I'm trying my best to get a shed for the baseball team at Greenwich High School. A shed, 16 by 10. You and I could install one at home in 30 minutes. There were 12 people on the email who had to approve it. That is absurd. And there's already a shed. So please, I implore you, every one of you.
30 seconds.
Come on, Karen, back up. Someone's got to make a decision. Who makes the decision on who does the field? There is a guy who says go. There is a guy at where I work that says go. There's a guy where he works that says go. Someone said to him, show up tonight at 7 o'clock and record. Someone has to say yes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, Dom, you're up next, followed by Eden Citron.
Good morning, board members, parents, teachers, and students. My name is Dominic Casamasima, and I'm here at Western Middle School, speaking with Eden Citron and Martin Lip. We are here to tell you about one of the biggest problems facing our society today, climate change. We know that today you will be voting on what to do with Central Middle School fields, and as students, we believe that artificial turf will be harmful for current and future CMS kids. Changing all the ground even a little bit would have a negative effect on the climate and levels of CO2 in the atmosphere. The loss of plants would reduce the amount of carbon dioxide absorbed and add plastics such as nylon or polypropylene. In addition, not only will you deprive many animals of their homes, but you will also be putting all kinds of dangerous metals such as lead, cadmium, chromium, and others into the environment. Lead is a chronic cumulative neurotoxin, basically meaning that it gathers up over a long time and is toxic for your brain. Cadmium is also known to cause cancer when inhaled can cause flu-like symptoms and kidney, bone, and lung disease. Chromium can cause many health problems ranging from skin rash and nosebleeds to alteration of genetic material. There are also many chemicals in the material that is used to make artificial turf that are known to be carcinogenic and irritants, meaning that they can cause cancer and irritate the skin. Artificial turf has other negative effects like asthma and learning disabilities. Not only that, but AstroTurf is known to heat up, making it very hard to play on a hot day. I pass my time to Eden Citron.
Hello, my name is Eden Citron, and I will now continue the argument made by Dominic Casamasina. Laura Kahn, a chairwoman of the New Haven Environmental Advisory Council, submitted a testimony saying, "We should not be removing soil and replacing it with synthetics. The soil is the Earth's filtering system for toxins. Removing large swaths of soil deprives our planet of its ability to absorb, dilute, and eliminate poisons." Laura Kahn. Artificial turf is comprised of at least 3 layers of synthetic materials, often 4. A plastic fabric mat, a layer of perforated polypropylene, styrofoam, EPDM, which is pretty much a synthetic rubber meant to replace the crumb rubber from tires that used to be used, and last, a carpet of plastic grass. Even if these materials can last forever, they eventually just break into smaller and smaller parts, which end up in our water and sometimes in our bodies. The crumb rubber itself, which is only 1 layer, is horrible for the environment. It is made up of ground up recycled tires, which contain numerous toxic chemicals, such as styrene and butadiene. Styrene is a neurotoxic and a probable human carcinogen. Tires are also likely to contain lead and cadmium, which are both neurotoxic as well as countless other toxins picked up from traveling on the roads or highways, where numerous other polyaromatic hydrocarbons and other harmful chemicals can be found. As you know from the process of the carbon cycle, cutting down the grass would mean fewer plants, or photosynthesizers, which would mean less absorption of CO2. Not only that, but the production of artificial turf would also emit CO2 into the atmosphere. I now pass my time to my fellow CMS student, Martin Lip. here continuing Dominic Casmasima and Eden Citron's argument. Financially, the cost to install artificial turf is staggering. I used Google Maps to estimate Central Middle School's fields at 4.43 acres, which is 272,000 square feet. Multiplied by the average cost of artificial turf per square foot equals about $2 million to install. You may think that artificial turf is easier to maintain, but it costs almost as much to maintain as natural grass, and it has to be replaced when it wears out. The health issues of artificial turf and overall installation cost is just not worth it. Putting engineered grass on the field also affects our students and the wildlife's health because it may contain pesticides and chemicals that are harmful to the environment. Overall, artificial turf is a much worse solution than normal grass. It is bad for the environment, dangerous to the animals that live there, the students that use it, and it is very costly. A much wiser solution is to use natural turf or to just replace the drainage. If you don't agree with what we are saying, if you think we are just kids and shouldn't be listened to, then don't listen to us. Listen to the science. For the health of our wallet, the health of our students, and the health of our planet. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. We actually always love to hear from students. All right, the next speaker is Bob Strassel, followed by Susan Rudolph.
Thanks. Members of the board, superintendent, my name is Bob Strassel. I live in Coscow, Connecticut. I've lived there for 11 years. All of my kids, my son is going to go to Central Middle School next year. My daughter's gone through Central Middle School. My daughter's now in high school. Both my kids are involved in athletics. My son plays for the Crushers, and he also plays baseball within the town. I just want to address the issue at hand, synthetic turf. There's been much back and forth regarding children's safety and the current issues of synthetic turf. For every report that people produce, each side can dispute it. I find it humorous that the opposition said nothing but turf was installed at Greenwich High School, Boys and Girls Club, Coscow Park recently. Huge installation, no one said a word. I find this dishonest, disingenuous, and hypocritical. It wasn't until turf was an option near where they lived that it was opposed. Or is the real issue unclear? That these people wish to exclude others from an area that is not theirs. It's all of ours, and really, it's our kids. The town has a shortage of playing fields, and the ones we have are substantially subpar. We've heard everybody talk, we know it, it's true. It's a record, okay? Fairfield County, Westchester, basically any state that I visited has better fields than Greenwich, Connecticut. It's sad. We're one of the wealthiest towns in the country, and our fields are terrible. According to the meeting notes of the March 22nd, 2018 meeting of the Board of Estimate and Taxation public hearing. Now I want you to just listen to this. Warren Silver, resident CMS neighborhood and parent of public school student, spoke in opposition to funding the BOE feasibility study of middle school playing fields. Opposition of the study and general lack of accountability for poor planning spoke in opposition to lighting school playing fields. Arthur Yee, resident CMS neighborhood for 30 years, spoke in opposition to funding the BOE feasibility study, the feasibility study of the middle school playing fields, and raised issue regarding artificial turf, lack of traffic studied by the BOA at Parks and Rec, and the GHS use of the CMS playing field. Pathetic. Lee and Tell, resident CMS neighborhood, spoke in opposition to funding the BOE feasibility study of middle school playing fields. Let's call a spade, okay? All the people are listed as part of the real grass for healthy kids. Pathetic. I hope there was a way to get the fields completed to benefit our kids, the neighborhoods, our schools, and the Greenwich community and sports programs. Here are a few comments made by the community. I'm a current student at the Central Middle School. And I think there's a need for turf because we never get to go outside for gym because it is always too wet. Also, I played for the baseball team, and last year we couldn't have a home game or even practice outside because the field was a swamp. The kids at CMS have suffered for years without opportunity to have outdoor PE due to the poor conditions of the fields. Sports have been impacted as well as due to this issue. This needs to be done to ensure future students get proper physical education. The community will also benefit with turf fields.
Time.
Thank you for your time.
Hang on one second. The next speaker is Susan Rudolph, followed by Tricia Taylor, and somebody left their glasses in the podium.
Peter, yours isn't working?
So good evening, I'm Susan Rudolph. I speak in a calmer voice as the grandmother of 3 grandsons, the youngest of whom will be at Central next year. I'm going to use my time to introduce 3 professionals who will be delivering remarks this evening. They are not being paid to be here. You will hear from Ms. Patricia Taylor, Deputy Outreach Director, as well as the Director of the Plastics Project for Environment and Human Health. Dr. Sarah Evans, mother of 3, is Assistant Professor of Environmental Medicine and Public Health at Mount Sinai. Classically trained neuroscientist, she conducts research on the effects of exposure to endocrine disrupting chemicals. Dr. Arthur Yee, who was educated in our own Greenwich Public Schools, did his internship and residency at Columbia Presbyterian. He's board certified in both internal medicine and infectious diseases. In addition, 4 others wanted to join us this evening, but they had scheduling conflicts. However, I have their written statements and will submit them following. Dr. Diana Zuckerman is president of the National Center for Health Research in Washington, D.C. After postdoctoral training at Yale Medical School, Dr. Zuckerman spent 10 years working at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Dr. David Brown is Director of Public Health Toxicology for Environment and Human Health. He was the Chief of Environmental Epidemiology and Occupational Health at Connecticut's Department of Health, and formerly a Deputy Director at the CDC in Atlanta, Georgia. Dr. Brown writes, "Good evening to everyone present, with a special greeting to the parents here tonight." He includes a number of facts and ends with this: before any more athletes or school children are exposed to artificial turf, we need to determine how those exposures will impact their health over time and whether more available field hours and predictable field quality are worth taking the measured risk to our children's health. Third, Dr. Vasily Vasilius is the chair of the Department of Environmental Health Sciences at the Yale School of Medicine, received his PhD in biochemical pharmacology. He writes the health hazards of agents used in artificial turf
30
fields
seconds.
is cause for conditional concern. Finally, Sue Baker sends a letter. She was a teacher at the high school, and she says, "I definitely believe there should be natural grass in our fields." So I direct this to you, ladies and gentlemen, and you people sitting here. Whenever you hear a statement that focuses on field time and predictable field quality while discounting or ignoring the health of people and environment, I urge you to think of what the scientists and physicians are telling us. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Tricia Taylor, followed by Arthur Yee.
Good evening and thank you. My name is Patricia Taylor. I am Deputy Outreach Director for Environment and Human Health, Inc. We're a 10-member nonprofit science-based organization composed of physicians, public health professionals, and policy experts. We're dedicated to protecting human health from environmental harms. Malone and McBroom has been hired to advise Greenwich on new fields for Central Middle School. They presented your town with 3 options for resurfacing the fields: natural grass, synthetic turf, or a hybrid of the 2. We're happy to see that Malone and McBroom has offered Greenwich the option of natural grass, and we are here tonight in support of that choice. It is EHHI's position that there is no safer surface for students and athletes to play upon than grass. I've submitted a letter to the board by EHHI's health professionals for your record. From their manufacture to their disposal, synthetic turf fields are more polluting and less healthy than grass fields. By installing artificial fields, you will expose your children and adolescent athletes daily to multiple chemicals of concern, including carcinogens, endocrine disruptors, and PFAs found in the components of these fields. Artificial fields need to be replaced 8 to 10 years' time. Connecticut has no special regulations for regulating how you will dispose of the fields. At the present time, there's only one certified recycling center for synthetic turf fields in the world, in Denmark. According to the Synthetic Turf Council, industry's lobbying group, the average artificial field contains approximately 40,000 pounds of plastic carpet and 400,000 pounds of infill. Greenwich residents voted to ban single-use plastic bags. Residents have organized to ban other plastic items like straws, stirrers, and expanded polystyrene food containers. 3 7th grade students at a private school in Greenwich, Whitby School, founded an organization called Greenwich Bottles No More, seeking to ban single-use plastic water bottles in your town. The Greenwich Recycling Advisory Board and Waste Free Greenwich are partnering with the Greenwich Department of Public Works, the Conservation Commission, and Greenwich Green and Clean to start a
30
townwide
seconds.
composting program by April 22nd. Do these residents and all those others who carefully recycle here every day know that synthetic means plastic? Synthetic turf fields are composed of acres of plastic grass backed by latex and rubber pads, glued together with polyurethane adhesive, and then filled with thousands of pounds of waste tire crumb rubber, which is also plastic, or alternative infills. As such, artificial fields are truly not in keeping with a sustainable Greenwich.
Thank you very much.
If you have additional comments, you can.
Pardon me?
If you have additional comments, you can.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
The time is up. If you have
Okay,
additional
thank
comments,
you
you
for
can
this.
submit those.
For all of this, we support
Okay, thank you very much. We
a
have
good
lot of
drainage
us-
system topped with natural
your
grass.
3 minutes is
I
up, and we
appreciate
have a
it.
lot of other speakers. Thank you. All right, next up is Arthur Yee, followed by Leanne Tell.
Okay, by way of introduction, I actually have been a resident here for 50 years, not 30 years, as one of the previous speakers said. I'm a parent of 3 daughters. One has gone through Central Middle School back in 2005, and I have 2 daughters who are currently students there right now. I myself graduated from Central Junior High School back in the 70s. I won't tell you what part of the 70s, but I graduated in the 1970s. I also want to tell Mr. Weinstein that I forgot my t-shirt at home, which said Central Side, the best side, not just said best side. So with that in mind, I want to let you know that, as you probably know, our current first selectman, who I've spoken to, and our previous first selectman, Peter Tessie, have come out in favor of natural grass over artificial turf. They came to that conclusion after reading literature, doing research, and speaking to many town residents about that before coming to conclusions. My question to the artificial turf proponents is, have you done your research? I seem to get more emotional response from the speakers here as opposed to doing the research, because if they've done their research, they would know that the EPA, the CDC, and OSHA have issued warnings against artificial turf. Which is either whether it's organic or not. There's no studies that show that artificial turf is safe for children. The other thing you fail to realize is that children and adults are different animals. Children are not miniature adults. In medicine, we know that children are more susceptible to toxic effects than anything. Why do we vaccinate kids when they're babies within 24 hours after birth against hepatitis B? Because we know that they can develop liver cancer with high risk. Why do we prevent kids from not smoking until age 21, which a lot of states have gone to? Because we know if they start smoking earlier, the toxic effects on their lungs will cause more chronic disease. Why does the American Academy of Pediatrics advise against contact football in kids 5 to 10 years old? They recommend starting in high school because studies have shown for American Academy of Pediatrics that kids who start football earlier have 12 to 13-year early development of chronic neurological brain disease by MRI scans and neurocognitive studies. So before you say you're proponent of artificial turf, have you done your research? I suspect not. And if you haven't, I will do so. Right now, there's no study showing it's safe in kids. As you know, this brings back memories of what happened to the tobacco industry. Back in the 80s, 1964, when the Surgeon General came out with reports saying that smoking and lung cancer were intimately related, the tobacco companies argued against that. It wasn't until 2 decades later that they finally acknowledged that there's a link between lung cancer and cigarette smoking. What about those people listed to cigarette companies? They had lung cancer. What about Christine Todman Whitman, the EPA administrator in
30
2001,
seconds.
when she declared that the water and the air was safe around 2000 at ground zero? Well, it wasn't. She apologized in 2016, saying that she misspoke. She didn't lie, she misspoke, because she acknowledged that there weren't those studies available to show that. Right now, there are no studies showing that it's safe in kids. Kids are more susceptible. Again, I'm not talking about NFL stadiums. That grown adults get exposed to. But you're talking about children. I do think that you don't realize the impact on children that's the potential there. To having some clusters of kids
Thank you.
with cancer, soccer goalies.
The next speaker is Leanne Tell, followed by Jeff Portelak.
Do you have Sarah Evans on that?
No, I do not.
Is she on a non-agenda item?
You may be on another list. There's another list down there. We'll call you when we get to your name. You're not the next speaker.
Sorry, thank you. My name is Sarah Evans.
Sarah, you're not the next speaker.
Oh, I cannot.
No, you're not. I don't see your name on the list that I have. There's another list. We will get to you. It's Leanne Tell, followed by Jeff Portelak.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Yes, my name is Leanne Tell. And just for the record, yes, a handful of us did put our names on an op-ed piece recently, but we have over 2,400 signatures on a petition against artificial turf. So it is more than just a few. I want to first start off by saying that I have an 8th grade daughter and a 6th grade son at Central Middle School. My daughter has been playing field hockey for the past 3 years at CMS, and my son has played soccer this past year at CMS. Both fabulous times, fabulous sports. As a mom of 2 Central Middle School athletes, I understand the frustration that people have when the fields are closed due to weather, as do my kids. I agree that something needs to be done to improve the fields. However, I do not believe that installing artificial turf is the right answer. Besides the health risks and environmental impact associated with artificial turf, there is also a higher cost with installing and maintaining artificial turf. Tonight, Board, you have 3 choices before you to change Central Middle School fields. It's a wonderful thing to have choices. If you decide to install artificial turf, you will be taking a choice away from parents whose children go to Central Middle School. Students will have no choice during PE classes or after-school sports programs but to play on artificial turf. I have heard that some parents at nearby private schools have taken their kids out of PE when they are playing on artificial turf. This was because they did not have a choice to play on natural grass. There are plenty of sports programs in town that parents can choose to sign their children up for. Some of those programs play on artificial turf, like at Coscob Park, like other people have said. That's a choice parents have. Central Middle School is a public school, and parents should have the right to have their kids learn in a healthy and non-toxic environment. Please don't take choice away from parents. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next speaker is Jeff Portelak, followed by Laura Costin.
Good evening. It's wonderful to be here in the town of Greenwich. My name is Jeff Portelak. I have a long storied history of trying to encourage people not to ruin the world. I have worked for the National Audubon Society here in town for 10 years. I spent the last 4 years certifying over 400 landscapers to be organic who work across the nation caring for lawns and sports fields everywhere. They're as close as this town and they're as far as Hawaii. They are doing the job because it's profitable, doable, and it works for the people who hire them. They don't complain about sports time. They are happy customers playing on grass with kids that know grass only. Don't forget, the U.S. soccer teams would rather to be on real grass for a reason. Kids like real grass, dogs like real grass, and when we change things to a turf field, it starts to go out of multiple use, especially in a school field. I mean, how many dogs want to roll around on those turf fields? But let me just give you some background for your decision, because your decision here tonight is to decide beyond a reasonable doubt what's the right thing to do. And I would like you to ask yourself, have you all heard about drug-resistant diseases that can be found and thrive on fake turf fields? Have you all assessed and set standards for when to stop summertime play above 80 degrees, where second and third degree burns are a well-known problem sending kids to emergency rooms? Second and third degree burns. Have you hired an organic specialist to bid on creating the natural field? I'm so glad to hear that one has been spec'd out, and that's great. Make sure you get multiple bids on grass fields, or have your current person, if you go with them for a grass field, work with the top experts, because they may be more experienced in turf fields than organic grass fields, which we're required to have at Central Middle School. Nothing but organic treatments. Have you heard about the fumes from the fires on those fields? What about the neighborhood when it catches on fire? Have you ever seen a tire
30 seconds.
bomb? Have you really thought that, my gosh, these terrible fields that have no drainage, they've already been putting up with 50 hours of use. Imagine if you gave them a little treatment, gave them some drainage, gave them some food, keep on top of things, and encourage the people that take care of them to have pride in them. Because there's hundreds of town workers celebrating their fields across the nation.
Time.
I've certified them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You guys are all wonderful. And please
Our next
invest in
speaker,
the
thank you.
sports
We
fields.
have additional speakers, so please be respectful of the time.
Please invest in
The
sports.
next speaker is Laura Costin, followed by Mike Pacino.
So my name is Laura Costin. I'm the parent of a Central Middle School student, and for years I've been an advocate before this board for children playing on grass fields whenever possible. And when it wasn't possible, I've advocated for organic surfaces, including at Cardinal Stadium. Playing on Central's field, as you know, has been dicey. We are in desperate need of an improvement. The Department of Parks and Rec says these fields are used for 53 hours a week for 3 months in the fall and 3 months in the spring. 20 of those 53 hours are accounted for by outside user groups, which may be one of the reasons our fields look like they do. 25 of those 53 hours are accounted for by our PE classes, and I am a parent who wants their child to be able to partake in PE classes whenever possible. And I've heard people say tonight that turf might solve this like muddy field problem. I've played college sports on turf. Anyone who plays on turf knows that you generally wear turf shoes or even cleats, which are less ideal, so that you're not sliding around all over on a turf. I don't think we're going to ask our students to purchase special shoes so they can participate in gym class, because otherwise it's a mess. So I really feel what we need is to prioritize. If usage of our school field is a priority for our students, the primary stakeholders, maybe it should be used primarily for that purpose. Perhaps secondarily, it should be used for town-run recreation. And lastly, when it comes to allowing Central to be used by for-profit entities and other leagues, perhaps there should be more discretion. My kids play for a great flag football league, but it's a for-profit entity that uses our grounds, and that means wear and tear. Maybe those teams, which range from pre-K to high school, should be encouraged to look elsewhere for practices. Carmel Academy on Lake Avenue is a school that is closing. They have fields. You know, we have private schools in town like Greenwich Country Day that don't even use their fields on the weekends. let's not ignore also the irony of where we are tonight at a school that hasn't had fields since 2016, and I was at that meeting where we were all stuck in a back room and couldn't ask any
30
questions.
seconds.
So, you know, we have space in this town. I suggest we actually utilize it, and at Central, give our kids a grass field and make it a good one quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mike Pacino, followed by Kurt Putnam.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the best side, West Side. Thank you guys for coming down tonight. Quickly, first, $30 million we don't have to remediate the fields out here. We need to cap it, we need to turf it, we need to light it up, make Western Middle School the showplace field of the town of Greenwich. We've got enough parking, enough field space. We're gonna have 3 lacrosse fields, a football field, a baseball field, a softball field. Everything we at Heart's Desire is right out there ready to do it. Get a set, make this happen. I'm gonna go in front of the Board of Selectmen and try to push this forward starting tomorrow. So let's get this ball rolling with Western. On another thing, let's talk to the Board of Health. We have had signs since I was a kid at every field that says no dogs allowed on Board of Education fields. We probably could settle this because people don't want turf because they can't let their dogs run. So let's end that. Enforce that law. But now let's get to the other points that are here. Quiet, come on, we only got 3 minutes. Their parents hard with this. So, you've got 2 things. You've got, and this is like, and I was a state representative up in Hartford, and this is like a reunion with these PhDs and doctors that all come in because we've had this debate before up in Hartford. We had this debate when I served on the Children's Committee when we were talking about crumb rubber fill at playgrounds being utilized, and we wound up outlining that. And why do we do that? Because kids between 4 and 8 and 1 and 4, where there's a potential for them to ingest crumb rubber. And we understood that that was a problem. Why? Because parents sit on their phones and they don't look at their kids anymore like they're supposed to do. But that's not the case. We never brought this up in Hartford talking about fields because this was a completely different issue. And it's a completely different issue here. And the same thing holds true as held true in those debates. Not one doctor, not one scientist, not one person that came up there could tell us of one case that was tied scientifically, specifically, without a question, without a doubt, that cancer was caused because of that particular athletic field. Never happened. Still hasn't happened to this day, but we go with the fear of God that we're going to get cancer from this artificial turf. Listen. Everything's better with bacon, but don't take my bacon away. They tell me that that may cause cancer too. You can't go on this premise. Now, we do have other fills. We have EnviroFill, we have Safe Shell, we have traditional rubber, sustainable pine infill. I know all this stuff.
30 seconds.
30 seconds enough. Okay, and then this last wonderful PhD talks about the remediation of the fields at the end of the day. Well, guess what? There is a company in Denmark. And I called them and talked to them. Guess where they're coming? United States of America. They have an application right now for the East Coast and the West Coast to build factories. And they recycle 99.3%. So that's where our recycled turf fields are going to go because they will be up and running by the time our fields are actually ready to be taken care of. So 2 questions that you have in front of you are done. Finite.
Thank you,
have
Mike.
no problems with those anymore. You have a company. And I will give you the information because I've already sent the information to Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mike. All right, the next speaker is Kurt Putnam, followed by Eric.
All right, Peter, I thought you had a question. I saw you. Oh, you're saying hi.
Just saying hi.
No, I sent you the information. Give it to them as well. Thanks.
All right, so Kurt Putnam, followed by Eric Mueller.
Okay, thank you for listening this evening. My name's Kurt Putnam. I've had the privilege of being in the town of Greenwich for over 20 years. I've been the Greenwich High School boys varsity coach for 20 years, Greenwich United and OGLCC coaching director for soccer, also the GSA volunteer president for the last 9 years while being also in that club for 20 years. I've probably coached and seen over 20,000 players from the town of Greenwich in the time that I've been here. And I consider that to be a privilege. Also, I've known Joe for a long, long time as well, going back many years. So a few things that I want to point out. One, you don't have enough grass fields in Greenwich to actually have proper grass fields because you can't rest them. That's the first problem that you have. If you had multiple grass fields, I'd be all for grass fields. All right, I prefer to play soccer on grass. I know kids do. You simply don't have enough of them. The best grass field that you did have got taken away. That was at Lower Havenway. You now can't go on it because the dogs are allowed to run on it. So, first of all, you've got to go to turf because you don't have a big enough supply of fields to start with. The second thing, the infields. So I was fortunate to be at Greenwich High School when they put the turf field finally in and into the entire campus. I'm still standing. I haven't dropped down dead yet. My health happens to be pretty good from what my doctor told me 3 weeks ago. There is a geo field that they do now. Okay, every field I have been to recently that's gone turf is not rubber anymore. It's an organic coconut shell. It's ground up, it doesn't give off toxins, and it seems that that's the way that turf fields are now going. They're white, and there's no rubber in them anymore. Okay, so I think people need to get beyond this fallacy that everything out there is all this ground up tire that goes in these fields. That's not the case anymore. Okay? And then the third thing, I think the reality is, we need to start thinking about our kids. This town loves to ride off the back of its town's programs and its high school programs being successful. Everybody loves to talk about that. That starts all the way down when your kids are younger. It doesn't happen when they just go to the high school. It's about the preparation that it takes to actually get them there. And with these fields that we currently have, and last year alone, GSA lost 50% of its practice time in the spring alone. 50% of the time kids could not actually go out on the fields and run around. I think that's an absolute travesty for a town like Greenwich, where I have been to literally every town in 20 years in Connecticut, and honestly, you have the worst fields in the state of Connecticut. The worst. And when people come down here to play games against us, they're shocked on their face. A quick story, last year I had to go and get a landscaper to blow the water off of a field so that my kids could play on it against the team.
Time. Thank
you. Need turf fields, okay? So way to go.
Thank you very much. All right, the next speaker is Erica Mueller, followed by Julie Deschamps.
I'm speaking today as a parent of a Central Middle School student. I have 4 kids. My husband and I both born and raised in Greenwich and also a school counselor in the district as well. So I'm very passionate about our kids and our community. I wanted to just say a couple things that haven't been said so far. In 2.5 days, we've had over 700 signatures in favor of turf field. The Parks and Recreation Department that is responsible for maintaining and assigning the fields is recommending turf for Central. The consultant the town hired also stated that with the amount of hours that Central is utilizing the fields, they should have turf. No one is saying that turf needs to be in every grass area in Greenwich. Central is a school field. It's not a park, as Mr. Moore mentioned. There are parks in the towns that have grass and can sustain a few hours a week when they're used, but Central is not the same as Binney Park or Bruce Park or Laughlin Park. We need a field that accommodates and supports an active student body, sports program, and town leagues. If you're truly looking for its best interests of the children of our community, then the answer is to install turf. As a town, we've already made a decision regarding its safety of turf when we installed it into the Greenwich High School field. Thank you.
All right, so it's Julie, followed by Rosemary Heisen.
Good evening. My name is Julie Deschamps. Tonight, I'd like to highlight 2 issues that have significant consequences for the health of our children and our environment. First, the health and environmental hazards associated with artificial turf present an unacceptable risk to the long-term well-being of our children and natural resources. It is essential to heed the warnings of scientists and medical professionals and take the precautionary approach. Natural grass with proper drainage, designed and maintained professionally, is the clear solution at Central Middle School. Second, I'd like to emphasize the necessity of transitioning to reusable wares and a dishwashing system in our school cafeterias. I thank the board for approving funds to implement a reusable ware system, but this is not a done deal. The superintendent and administration, as instructed by the board, still must present the most fiscally responsible, sustainable, and effective plan to the BET and RTM, and do their due diligence in a timely manner to find the best solution. The district purchases over 1 million single-use wares at a cost of $61,000 each year. The majority is tossed in the trash to be incinerated at a cost to taxpayers and a detriment of our air and soil quality. These non-recyclable paper trays alone make up 80% of cafeteria trash, as demonstrated during the New Lebanon pilot, and you can see in this photo from Old Greenwich School today. If disposable trays are replaced by reusable wares, waste output will be cut from 6 barrels of trash to just 1 per day. For all K through 8 schools, that equates to 12,600 bags of trash saved annually, enough to fill almost 19 tractor trailers. This volume costs our town over $39,000 to incinerate currently, but could be more in the coming year. Waiting another year means wasting $100,000 in purchasing and disposal costs. It is another year of trashing over 500,000 trays. Another year of pedagogical dishonesty, teaching students that it's okay to be wasteful. A message
30 seconds.
that students clearly take to heart, as you heard from Zane earlier. And the town of Greenwich is recognizing the fiscal and environmental consequences of wasteful practices. The time is now to lead by example and do what's right for our community. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Rosemary Heisem, followed by Jennifer Katai.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm here tonight to speak in support of what I think is the easiest, quickest, and best solution for Central Middle School, which is to install turf fields. I have 2 middle school age children. My son plays both baseball and soccer. He's been fortunate enough to be at Eastern Middle School, which I think has had the most access to their fields. It still does get closed on days of inclement weather. But his soccer practices through the Greenwich United organization have occasionally been canceled because they're located sometimes at Central Middle School. And when it's rained, the fields have become unplayable at times. But having watched a middle school boy over the last 3 years, the idea that they can't go out and run and move their body during the hours that they are in school, have to be confined to the gym, the tennis courts are a more limited area. Having the fields usable is very important, and so I ask that you support the artificial turf on the fields. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Jennifer Katai, followed by Alon Katai.
Good evening. Over the last 9 months, my husband and I have stood before this board to discuss our daughter Lily's special education journey in the Greenwich Public Schools. What started out to be a story about our daughter has now become a much larger journey for scores of families and teachers across this district. I want to applaud the brave teachers who stood up here tonight in support of special education reform. I'm here tonight not only to represent our daughter, but as a representative to many special education families. I am also one of the parents who was chosen to sit on the KEDAD task force. KEDAD task force had a meeting last evening, and we were made privy to the results of the interview process, which included parents as well as teachers and administrators. I was particularly awestruck by teachers and administrators whose thoughts were brutally honest and in most cases confirmed what parents have been vocalizing for years. To our board members, I highly suggest you read the draft report. Year after year, we sit at these Board of Ed meetings and we hear about advances in curriculum throughout the district. We never hear about any innovative programs to address the growing concerns for special education. We have the data, we have the research on techniques that are successful. Why aren't we bringing them into Greenwich Public Schools? We hear about millions of dollars spent on Cardinal Stadium. We hear about money spent on recycling and green schools concerns. But yet this Board of Education has been unable to find the funds to provide an appropriate education to our special education children. Special education parents have voiced their concerns both to this board as well as to the BET. We are active participants in Key to Ed. We have said it before, and I will repeat it tonight. We believe in Dr. Jones. She has been a pillar of strength. We know she wants change for our special education children, but her hands are tied. Teachers have now publicly stated they fear retribution for speaking up. They have stated they need training. We need the board members here to stop talking.
30 seconds.
Get out of your seats to make change for these children. Children are suffering. Find the funds now. We won't accept that it will take years to come up with funding for these children. We won't accept more talk or more surveys. The data you need is right in front of you tonight. Get behind Dr. Jones and give her the ability to make the necessary changes. We won't accept that you are forcing teachers to break the law.
Time.
So the next speaker is Brian Tunney, followed by Elena Cantaven. I'm going to get that wrong, I'm sorry.
Hello, and hello all, and thank you very much. I'm talking here regarding Central Middle School. I will give you a background. Yes, I am a neighbor. Yes, I've coached lacrosse since 1990, coached thousands of children. And the fact, one of the big reasons we're all saying the fields are closed so much. 30 years ago, the fields were never closed. We played in the rain. We played sports, whatever the weather was. Now, for Central Middle School is in the middle of the largest greenway in Greenwich, going from Greenwich Country Club, Greenwich Country Day School, and into the Pomerantz property. There are deer, wildlife going through that field every day. The other thing is that, granted, we need more fields. The issue with Central Middle School is it's one of the only fields in town that is below street level. It's below grade. It's going to fill. Anything we put in there, especially a grass field with drainage, will survive. You could get the use, but clearly any use that you're going to do, the field's got to be raised, and it's got to have drainage. Another thing that I think that you should really look at is eventually a new school is going to be built. With a grass field, you have a little more options to move around the buildings, whatever you have to do. I'm not an expert in construction, but clearly they're not going to put it in the parking lot. It's going to be towards the fields. Another thing is, anyone that lives near Central, that field is used all the time. It is not a private park. It is used by students and pay-to-play programs year-round, every weekend, and every day. So, I love it. I'm a sportsman. Another thing, the health issues. You can say yes or no, but why, if we have the option of a grass field, why not use it? It can be done. It's less expensive to maintain, and and can be seeded every year. You know, it can be made. The key is it's a properly drained field, and that can be used. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, the next speaker is Elena Cantanen, followed by Warren Silver. Yep, Mr. Sheriff.
How many more of these do we have?
So after this speaker, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 signed up. Aaron, is there another sign-up sheet?
And are we just taking them all in order? Or?
We're taking them in order.
Okay.
First, I want to say thank you to all the board members here. My name is Elena Cantabero, and it is an honor to be here tonight. I served in 9th grade here. I think it was probably the last year 9th grade was here as the 9th grade school president. And that was just a wonderful year. It's giving away my age a little bit, huh? I just want to say, be very careful with how you are making your decisions about this field. If it's your child, and it's just one child, and it's your child, just imagine what it would feel like when your child, and this happened to a family member, and this family member of mine, who, while playing football, developed asthma. Never had it before in his life. He developed asthma. He couldn't breathe. But he was insistent on playing, and he played. And every time it was hot, he couldn't breathe. But he continued to play. He also suffered and had 2 concussions. He was told 1 more, that's it. Luckily, he was at the end of his year, and he was out, luckily. Be careful. Do your studies. I'm not saying not to get a turf, but I'm not saying to get a turf. Be careful. Do your studies. Get your recommendations. Get your scientific data. Don't play around with this. Like I said, if it's one child, and that one child belongs to you. I know dads love to have their kids play, moms are proud of them. Don't even take the chance, all right? Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, we're taking comments in the order that they're
Right
written.
here, just asked you how many more people were going to speak.
And
He's not even paying attention. He's texting on his phone.
I'm sorry, sir, we're taking the public
We
comment.
elected you to sit at that board. Start paying attention to these people.
All right, the next speaker is Warren Silver, followed by David Rudolph.
You heard me. I see you. Yeah, you should.
Okay, let's move on, please.
Good evening, my name is Warren Silver, and I oppose artificial turf. First of all, unlike the petition that the lady stood up and said has 700 signatures, let me point out, you didn't have to be a resident to sign it, and you didn't have to be 18 years old. We have a petition here, on the other hand, with 2,400 signatures from Greenwich residents that oppose artificial turf at Central Middle School. Every signature here is a resident who's 18 years old and over.
I'd like to submit this first of all.
Great point. Thank you,
Second of all, for 3 years now, the Board of Education has denied kids at Central Middle School state-of-the-art, well-designed grass fields. The Board of Education has rejected millions of dollars of funding, both from the current and the former selectmen, Fred Camilla and Peter Tessie. The question is why? I suspect it's because the Board of Education desires to build a regulation-sized football field for the high schoolers. Let me make the point here. I keep on hearing this whole comment about playable time. Playable time. The field's only got 25 hours of playable time. If anybody took the time to read option 1 of Malone, the grass field they're recommending is 170,000 square feet. Does anybody know what a professional sized soccer field is? That's 65,000 square feet according to FIFA. So essentially, we're building 3 fields. 3 fields means 25 hours per field is 75 hours of playable time as a frame of reference. But professional lacrosse field is only 57,600 square feet. A professional American football field is 57,000. That grass field is 170,000 square feet. You can put more than 75 hours of playable time if you rotate the field the way it's meant to be done, and it's got proper drainage. Okay.
Come down there, you can't get 3 fields on it.
Okay, please.
25 hours according to Malone. Read the survey. You haven't read it.
Okay, please, we're listening to his comments.
And for all of those people, why is it that no major professional sports teams, including soccer, baseball, or even NFL, play exclusively on artificial turf? Yes, in the United States and after South Africa, we have 31 NFL stadiums, of which the majority of them are grass fields, real grass fields. So stop making up the stuff about infill and all of that stuff. Artificial turf has carcinogens and it's bad for the kids, period.
Thank you. The next speaker is David Rudolph, followed by Jen Dubrinsky.
I'd like to give my time to Dr. Sarah Evans, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Sarah Evans.
Sarah, I'm sorry, you were signed up later on. If you could please follow the order of the speakers.
He's yielding his time to speak.
That's not how we operate. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We need to follow the order of the speakers as they're signed up.
Are you sure?
Your name actually was not written on the sheet originally, so we've checked the sheet. Okay, the next speaker is Jen Dubrinsky, followed by Maria. I'm sorry, I'm not going to try to pronounce your name. I'm going to mess it up.
I want whatever turf. My daughter attends GPS. I'm really nervous, but we are not raising children. We are raising adults. I entrusted her to you. She's only in kindergarten. She's vulnerable, fragile, and has very little expressive language. She has autism and inherently has a disability that can manifest in negative behaviors. She's not high-functioning type, but she's kind of in the middle of the spectrum type. This fall, when I began to see her devolve and self-harming at a rate that I'd never seen before, at home, towards objects and towards me, I became very, very concerned and expressed this to her school. That these aggressions were happening at school, I was asking about it, and it was just sort of sugar-coated. I understand my parental responsibility to help her in all facets of her life, yet the money I've spent and hours that I've watched her do such hard work since she's 18 months old, it's all gone. Miss Jillian, you know she was potty trained when she came. It's gone. You are the best thing she ever had. Anyways, instead I now have a 6-year-old with separation anxiety so bad that when I pull up to our driveway just to get the mail, 2 steps, she screams and tries to get out. She's in a 5-point harness, and God knows I will keep her in one for as long as I can. We are not raising adults, and I do not want my child to regress. Multiple times on a daily basis, this is what I hear from my child say. In the last, I would say, 4 months. Lola makes bad choices. Lola is a bad girl. I'm nothing. I'm 0. Mommy needs to go to the doctor because I hit Mommy and I hurt people. Nobody wants a broken doll. The hell says that? Lola is broken. It's a bittersweet adventure to have a child with special needs. But at her diagnosis of 18 months, I've done my best to
30
embrace
seconds.
my responsibility. The truth is that you gaslight me, you hide, you have her teachers lie to me, and I am not putting up with it anymore. It's not okay to do it. We are here to work with you, and you deny us that right. I get an advocate because I want better solutions, yet you don't want to educate, you want to litigate. You want your jobs more than raising children to be adults.
Time.
And I'm done with it.
Thank you. Okay, please feel free to email the board if you'd like.
Oh, no.
Thank you.
I mean, sorry.
All right, the next
Not it.
speaker,
Thank you.
Maria, followed by Myra Falkenberg.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Maria Nikolajczyk, and I am a mom of a CMS student in 7th grade. But tonight I'm speaking on behalf of Greenwich Conservation Advocates. We are a grassroots group of residents who live in all areas of town, which supports and promote local water conservation and water quality protections. Our mission includes protecting open space as a significant element impacting water quality and supply. We are here to support improving and maintaining natural grass fields at all of our schools. Natural grass fields at our schools are open space, which currently provide many benefits in our town, such as stormwater absorption and infiltration, flood prevention, water quality improvement, habitat for soil organisms such as insects, worms, and microbes which improve the soil, and cleaning of the air as all living plants do. In contrast, the lifeless compacted soil under artificial turf and artificial blades of grass can do none of these things. Artificial turf becomes a pollution vector, leaking chemicals into the soil and water, which will result in additional remediation costs in the future. Here in Greenwich, we are painfully aware of the high cost of soil remediation at our schools. We have school fields that are currently sitting unused at Western Middle School and Greenwich High School. It is illogical to use tax dollars remediating contaminated soil at great expense, only to promptly begin contaminating it yet again with artificial turf. As you've heard from this articulate students that were here earlier, the artificial turf includes toxic chemicals. These break down over time and are released into the air, soil, and our groundwater. In school areas which do not already have soil contamination issues, the last thing we should be doing is undertaking new projects that will contaminate our school soils and our groundwater below it. We argue that there is a failure of logic and fiscal responsibility to take uncontaminated natural grass fields at Central Middle School by starting a project that's going to create contamination there. We should be looking at other options that are healthy for our kids and for our environment. Therefore, we advocate to improve the natural living grass fields. Not only is it better for Greenwich's ecology and quality of life, it is a responsible decision for Greenwich's taxpayers. We support using our tax funds to better manage the drainage and the groundwater infiltration and organic maintenance methods to improve the fields we have.
30 seconds.
Students and the benefit of our entire ecosystem, because we all need clean water. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. All right, so Myra Falkenberg, followed by Elizabeth Dempsey.
Hello, my name is Myra Klockenbrink, and I am a resident of Coscob. And I'd like to say that this issue of the grass versus artificial turf is a no-brainer. Artificial turf is polluting to create, being a fossil fuel-derived product. It is polluting to use because it off-gasses chemicals when it's new and gets into children's tissues as it degrades. Cancer does happen in our children and so why expose them unnecessarily? It is polluting to get rid of because you never really can. And until it is gone, it leaches chemicals into our watershed. Grass, on the other hand, is a living thing. that breathes oxygen and sequesters carbon. It cools the air. It is not polluting to create, use, or dispose of because it is alive. Greenwich need not consider the water demands of grass because we receive enough rain to float an ark. Indeed, grass can absorb water and slow runoff to our streams. Although grass does require upkeep, there are best practices available for caring for it without chemicals. Yes, grass requires maintenance, which costs money, but maintenance provides jobs and community, and the money we spend is for the long-term health of our residents. After all, we're raising healthy children to be healthy adults. And as my GHS son reports, it's also much more fun to play on, especially when it's properly maintained. And excuse me, but aren't we facing huge costs, as stated $10 million and upward of maybe $100 million more, to remediate the soil and water around Greenwich High School for a similar short-sighted practices
30 seconds.
that have contaminated the soil and water? Does the left hand know what the right hand is doing?
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Elizabeth Dempsey, followed by Sarah Evans. That is the last speaker that we have signed up, and then we'll move into the rest of our meeting.
Hi, thanks very much for the opportunity to speak. I'm going to scrap what I was going to say and go just a little bit off kilter, since many people have already voiced the same topics that I have. So I'm a mom and a resident of Greenwich for 20 years. My two boys played all over Greenwich Fields, including Western before it was locked up, and I know all about sports. My boys were both Division I athletes, so I'm very cognizant of the issue of the need for sports. But in my view, your job first and foremost is to protect your students. And so I would highly advocate for natural grass. It's time we turn the corner in Greenwich. I live across from Greenwich High School, as many of you on the board know, so we have an opportunity here to try to do things the right way. Maybe not, it's not as convenient for all the parents driving to every single game, but we can do this, and as Laura Costin aptly pointed out, there's so many places that we can put in new fields that haven't been used. Just want to applaud also Fred Camillo's mention in the budget of remediating Western, just getting those fields back online. Where there's a will, there is a way. I also wanted to point out a technical thing that hadn't been mentioned. I'm not an expert, but my understanding is that turf fields require regular disinfectants. Kids slide, especially on turf. They get bloody. It's part of a regular part of artificial turf to be disinfected. Also, you're aware that in Connecticut there's a law that prohibits anything that's not organic put on our fields. So I would suggest you build, if you have to build an artificial turf field, that you don't do it at Central, because that violates state law. And I'm not an expert, but it's something you really need to consider, because there'd be a lot of people looking at that if you're disinfecting in a non-organic way on a middle school field. And I believe that's why our first selectman was for natural grass, particularly on elementary and on middle school fields. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Sarah.
Okay, I think you all now know that I'm Sarah Evans. I'm not a resident of Greenwich. I have no personal stake in the decision that you all make for this field. I'm just here to talk about the current state of the science related to artificial turf. I have a doctorate in neuroscience and a master's in public health, and I completed a 3-year fellowship in environmental pediatrics. And I'm here today to speak on behalf of the Children's Environmental Health Center at Mount Sinai in New York City, where I'm an assistant professor. So we are a collective of pediatricians and independent research scientists devoted to understanding the impact of environmental exposures on children's health and disease. We've thoroughly reviewed the scientific evidence related to the use of artificial turf, and we've concluded that to date, studies do not adequately demonstrate the safety of these products. So it may surprise some of you in this room tonight to hear that that conclusion is echoed by state agencies as well as federal agencies. Although a Connecticut Department of Public Health study is widely cited as proof for the safety of turf, the DPH's own 2015 fact sheet, which is available today on their website, states, quote, "The 2010 risk assessment of 5 artificial turf fields in Connecticut does not provide conclusive evidence about the safety of artificial turf fields. There's still uncertainty and additional investigation is warranted," end quote. Likewise, in 2016, the US EPA, CDC, and Consumer Product Safety Commission launched a federal study into the safety of crumb rubber. That study is still ongoing, and they stated existing studies do not comprehensively evaluate the concerns about health risks from exposure to tire crumb. And although the focus of that study is on tire crumb, a 2016 US EPA status report of that study found that research on alternative infills like EPDM, like EnviroFill, like TPE, like plant-based materials are, quote, lacking or limited. So until these studies are complete, the CHC recommends that communities utilize natural grass fields. And I just want to mention what we consider when we think about risk assessment from artificial turf. So the first question is, do these products contain harmful chemicals? We know for crumb rubber that yes, absolutely, they do contain chemicals that are linked to cancer and that are toxic to the nervous system. US EPA and many agencies and independent studies have shown this. That realization has led to the increase in the use of alternative infills, some of which we've mentioned tonight. These are generated from materials like silica sand, which is linked to cancer and respiratory disease. Plastics, which contain hormone disruptors. Rubbers that contain many of the same chemicals of concern as recycled tire rubber.
30 seconds.
And purported natural chemicals. And although these studies on alternatives are lacking, scientists at Mount Sinai and the toxic use reduction industry have found the presence of known carcinogens and neurotoxins in almost all of the alternative infills that we have examined. A few studies have looked at whether these chemicals get into the body, so that's the next question in risk assessment. US EPA is studying that now, but that data is not yet available. And the next question that we would ask is whether...
Time.
Okay, so in closing, I would just like to say that it's the opinion of the Children's Environmental Health Center at Mount Sinai that conclusive scientific studies have not been conducted. And I have a document that I'll give to you that references many
Thank you very much.
studies that
All right. With that, we're going to move on to our monthly reports, starting with the superintendent.
Thank you. For the essence of time, I'll just mention a couple of items. Most of them were actually mentioned tonight. Just letting you know, we will talk more about it during the financial report, but we did put in a freeze on finances yesterday, which what that means is essential spending only, and that really is attributed to that gap that we talked about last month of that kind of 1.2 million. And we are making headway on that, but again, it is essential spending only. So if we have a new course and somebody really needs course materials, they just have to go through the principal and take that to central office. We had our special education devising seminar last night, and so a special thank you to all of the people that participated in that, and the board will be seeing a draft of that report, but we hope within the next week we'll actually have the final format. They had just done the interviews, finished some interviews the day before, so they didn't want to put out the report before they had everybody's comments included. Just on a side note, we did have a safety forum back in November, and as we slowly worked through what some of those challenges were, one of the things at high school was a concern that if kids are out on the fields, end of the day, maybe they don't get picked up, don't have a ride, we don't really have great cell service on that campus, nor do we have internet. So thank you to Mr. Ting and his staff who just finished putting in internet on the outside and back of the building so that it's a safer zone for kids now. And I was going to mention, which Gordon already mentioned, but we did have 20 students that wanted a magnet in, which is, we were very surprised, and actually he had to have a conversation today about, wow, can we have 20 more students and still absorb it at Western? But that was great news and great conversation. Last but not least, I'll just mention that I did send the board a note today about preschool. And as you know, we're going from 14 sections to 13, which means we had to really analyze which sites are really functioning well, where do we have the most requests, We actually stopped our lottery just to have a little deeper analysis. We were looking at, could we leave one class at Parkway? That is our site that's farthest away. We have the fewest students. In the end, for the essence and what we thought was best for children, that program is moving to North Street School. And so Parkway will not house pre-K. That also helps in some regards just in services, in that now we don't have service providers driving again between those two buildings, which frees up more time because we can't ask teachers on their planning time to be driving. So that, I think that's going to be a benefit for us, but it is a change. That's all for me.
All right, Mr. Sheriff.
Tony, I thank you, by the way, for sending the board the note notifying us about the change in preschool at Parkway. But it referenced in there the lottery, because I know the lottery's running right about now. And I wasn't clear on exactly where we are with the lottery. So we've taken the applications, correct? And did you say
Yes.
have we suspended? When were we supposed to finish taking the applications? Do you know?
I might deflect here just for our timing. We've taken about an extra week and a half beyond what we would normally have done.
Okay. And have we run the lottery yet? Okay. So now I'm going to have okay. I'm going to ask you guys a hard question, which is going to throw a monkey wrench in everything. I'm sorry. I hoped your answer to that was we hadn't run the lottery yet. Are the rules that are published on our website the rules you're using this year at New Lebanon? Okay. We have a problem, okay? Because when we put in the sections at New Lebanon, we discussed this last year, okay? There was to be no preference given to people in the New Lebanon catchment zone for the New Lebanon classrooms. And we discussed this last year with you, Mary, and you assured us that I asked, who told you to do that? And you said, oh, no one. I assumed that's what it was because that's how it was at Hamilton Avenue. And the board has never taken action to put those rules in. We took sections out of other schools at Parkway, moved them, by the way, which were open to the town. We moved them to New Lebanon, closed them to New Lebanon, and the board never took that action when it did that. So I understand this happened last year, but we were given assurances in a board meeting, you can go back and look in the minutes to see it in the tape, that those rules would not be mistakenly applied this year. So I don't know what we've done, but we've essentially closed, we've dramatically reduced by 3 or 4 sections the town-wide pre-K when it got moved down to New Lebanon. So I'm interested in understanding what happened. You guys don't have to answer it tonight, but I want to know what happened because this was brought up at a prior board meeting. We were given an assurance by the people who run the program. That shouldn't have happened.
Yeah, thank you. I would have to follow up later because I would have to go back and watch the tape.
And Tony, no offense to you, you're the one who, unfortunately, once again, new superintendent, catching it, had nothing to do with you if the staff didn't tell you about this. So I'm sorry, I'm dumping the problem on you, but I guess that's what you get being the first-year superintendent. I'd really appreciate hearing about that.
I guess, Peter, I might remember it a little differently. We had a discussion, but we don't actually set the policies for the lottery, so I'd be interested to see what Dr. Jones comes up with. Anyway, Ms. Stowe.
Different question. Is this working? Whatever.
It's working, just keep talking to it, I will adjust it.
All right, Aaron. Okay. Patiently waiting. Tony, quick question. Not that it's a big headline anyway, but Star, elementary school parent represented here, apparently has been delayed. I don't know. I'm getting a lot of questions. Parents are frustrated. Month, 6 weeks? Can you tell me what's happening?
I'll speak softly. So I believe that they are actually going out next week, and I'm just looking, I can't, is it tomorrow? Okay, it's tomorrow.
Do we know what happened?
Yes.
What happened?
Yeah, so at the beginning of the year, well, let me put it this way, there were some students who had, like, if they didn't test where the teachers thought that they should have been, and they wanted to retest, what happened in the first pull or upload is that it pulled all the first scores, and so for some of the students, it was not the right score, so we felt it was more important that they be correct, and so they had to redo the whole upload again with ECRIS.
What? Can you say that again? What does it mean they tested and it wasn't the right score, so they tested again? What does that mean?
Well, I mean, you can have a child.
I'm sorry, I'm just confused by that.
No, you can have a child who is taking the assessment and they're not feeling well. You can have a child who needs to go to the bathroom in the middle of the assessment. There are all kinds of reasons, and sometimes it's a student that is, a sixth grader, and they'll click, 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 just because they don't want to take the assessment. And, the teacher comes and says, I would really like to reassess because this is going to be important to the family. So they will reassess.
So sorry, that becomes a bit subjective. This is on you. That becomes a bit subjective, right? Because then the teacher is saying, this student was feeling off this day, or this student wasn't feeling well, or this student went click, click, click too fast. Like, where that then gets into some really gray territory. I find that really alarming.
Yeah, this is not a state test. We couldn't do that on a state level test. This is an assessment that is supposed to help guide instruction for teachers that, and if they notice something and they know a child is sick, I hope that they would come and say to the principal, I really want to reassess this child. And we should be doing that really on almost anything. It doesn't happen a lot, but in the upload this year, it only pulled if kids had that additional score, they were incorrect.
And was that transparent beforehand, or is that something you just did?
We realized it actually after. Like they had already gone to ECRIS, they had done the growth formula, sent it back, it hadn't gone to parents.
Was that transparent? I guess, I don't know if it was on the record. Is that transparent beforehand? It's just that, is this normal practice that teachers will then say, I think this kid, this kid, this kid, this kid could do better, they're going to get a redo? Is that?
I think it's very normal practice because it's a universal screener. It's not meant to, it's not a state assessment. State assessments are very strict.
But it is being used as placement, correct? For
we use it for placement for some things, but
it does track students, yes? It's used for placement. So if you have some students who are saying, I think this student should retake.
Well, we don't use any one assessment for placement for everything. I mean, there's a lot more criteria, multi-criteria.
This is one of them.
This is one of them, and if a teacher feels like it wasn't accurate, we would want to give them that, ability as a teacher to say they want to reassess.
Question.
Mr. Kelly.
So it's the teacher that decides whether the kid needs to be reassessed, not outside involvement.
Right, it's somebody that's looking at that score, they know that child, they don't feel like it's accurate, and yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Hirsch.
I was going to say, I know that you're discussing that in regards to kids who aren't feeling well and things like that, and it is, as one of the questions I'd ask, which we can get to when we get to the special ed. The monitoring report was about a universal screener, and the answer was that this is being used as a universal screener for students who are reading, to discover reading concerns and issues. So it does concern me if we're giving certain students retakes. If we're finding something, hopefully they're giving that just to confirm as opposed to get a different score.
Yeah, and I think if you would ask staff, that's probably one of the things we don't like about STAR is it's supposed to be a screener. It's really supposed to just help inform where kids are struggling, and kind of what's happened is STAR has morphed and changed into this parent more assessment, scary assessment, than it is really for the teachers and our children, but it's supposed to be a screener, and it's the #1 screener on the national RTI database. This is the #1 screener because it's fast and it's not supposed to be diagnostic. It doesn't get into exactly where children are having trouble, but it's supposed to be able to pick up very quickly for a child who is struggling, and then you go to the other assessments that give you the detail that teachers are really looking for to inform the instruction.
If a child is struggling and a teacher says, and a teacher says, here, we do this, and then maybe they're struggling just a little bit less, could that then make it so this child is not elected towards special education services. I'm saying we
Oh,
could be
no,
missing,
no.
but no, there is a chance that we could be missing the mark here if we're saying, here, retry this, maybe you weren't feeling so great, they do just a little bit better, and it's more of our children falling through the cracks.
No,
That's a
I mean,
concern.
a universal screener is really meant just as a screener, and it's not the be-all, end-all, and teachers are using a multitude of resources and information that they're using with children.
Mr. Sherry.
Tony, I agree with you. I always understood in the assessment framework that Irene Parisi has explained to us is that STAR is a formative assessment. It was to be deployed internally, really to help teachers understand where students are at various waypoints along an academic year. It was also selected because it was highly correlated to the Connecticut state assessments. The thing I think we kind of veered off into difficulty. So I think what you're saying is correct. I'm not so sure I'm so keen. I mean, we've had discussions in the board before about the overusage of that test. We discovered that teachers were vastly overusing this thing, which was a surprise to the board. As you know, one of the most important things is for the board not to be surprised. So maybe something, just a little reminder, make sure you don't get surprised. But the more important thing is it morphed into this thing where we were sending home the assessment. When you send it home an assessment, and I've said this 100 times, the STAR thing we actually send home, which we select, Renaissance has different ones, we select one that's damn near useless, and we send it home. What I understand everything you're saying. Maybe the way to solve this is to get on with sending home the learner profile, which we paid for years and years ago, and we've never deployed and never rolled out. Because what parents are interested in, which I think is probably underneath a little bit of what Kathleen is saying, is parents are very interested to get a holistic picture of what's going on with their student in the school. And to send home a STAR assessment that tells me how well I'm doing against kids in Louisiana or Arkansas really doesn't tell me very much. So maybe we should de-emphasize this, push it back to what it's supposed to be, and speed up. I think you've heard tonight enough. Candidly, I'm glad people are showing up at the board saying, what the hell are you people doing? Because we talk about stuff, but we don't get stuff executed. And this is something we've talked about, and we need to move on with getting that done, and it might help solve this problem so this question never comes up again.
Yeah, I just said, actually, I had that in my superintendent's report, and I didn't mention, I was just going to put it in my Friday note, but we should have that live within the next 2 weeks. I was in a meeting today, and the big thing about the PLP is making sure parents know how to log on. So we will be sending out the directions before our next board meeting. That should be out there.
That would be a huge win.
All right, if there's nothing else for Tony, we will move on to reports of officers, committees, and liaisons. Ms. Olson.
So the DTAC Distinguished Teachers Awards Committee, the nomination date, the deadline is March 12th at 5 p.m. So we've had a lot of phenomenal teachers and people that work in the district be nominated. So please continue to nominate your peers, teachers, and that'll be announced on April 22nd, and the award ceremony will be held on May 5th. But the important date right now is the deadline date is March 12th, 5 p.m. So continue to get those nomination packets in. Our teachers deserve it.
And then we have Mr. Kelly.
I had the pleasure of filling in for my friend Karen Kowalski in the Food Services Committee just recently. I thought it's really interesting to be involved in something that probably 100% of the community is behind, the reduction of plastics in our school system. But my only suggestion, that brief time I had to serve on that committee, Karen, I hope I'm not stepping out of line if she can hear us, that basically it's important that we support this group a little bit more. In the brief time I was in that meeting, it seemed that we were pushing against them rather than getting behind them and supporting them. So if we somehow have to increase the size of that group, put more firepower on it, let's get more people behind these people. They're doing God's work here, so let's make sure we get it done.
Ms. Stowe.
Okay, now we'll go to boring policy after that, which is on the agenda for tonight, so we'll just do it then. And then Parks and Rec feasibility study update. We've talked a lot about fields tonight, but I will let you know that next week, our sort of joint task force between the Parks and Rec and Board of Ed will be continuing to work with the consultant on the overall fields throughout town.
Anybody else? I know a strategic plan coming up. All right, if there's nothing else, we will move on to our discussion items. So the first item is the special education report. Ms. Ford.
Thank you. You have the report. I'm just going to give a general overview of the sections and then open it up for any questions you have. I did receive about 20 questions this morning. We worked on them today. We tried to get it to you before the meeting, but we just ran out of time. So that will be available to you. The one thing I do want to mention before I get started is there was an actual error in the report. Some of the numbers got transposed, so I'll give you those correct numbers now, and then you'll see that when I will correct the actual report itself. It's on the page 8, and it has to do with the numbers for the 2015-16 school year. The numbers got transposed when we copied it onto the new report. The number of referrals for 2015-16 by parents should actually be 48, and the number of school referrals should be 135. The big difference is in the numbers of types of referrals. The initial referrals should be 171, and the percentage is 78. Consultation record case reviews should be 30, and the percentage is 14. And response to private evaluations, PIPES, was 18. So those numbers got transposed incorrectly when we moved it from the document it was in into the report. I will give you a corrected copy of the report, but just I hope that answers some questions people had. In terms of the executive summary, I think that speaks for itself. We did look at some areas of investigation that we think the report for next year should focus on, including our compliance with IDEA, the efficiency and efficacy of the programs that we're providing, and I detailed some of the items that I think we should recommend to whomever does that study. In terms of the introduction, our two big initiatives this year had to do with Key to Ed, and they are the facilitated IEP training. And this is a different way of looking at IEP meetings, which tend to be somewhat bureaucratic sometimes. There's a lot of paperwork. They're not always child family friendly. So we reinvestigated the facilitated IEP training, which we had done years ago. And we had Key to Ed come to us, and they were able to do that training again. We traded a team from every school. It was an administrator, a special education teacher, and a general education teacher. People somewhat at the initial part of this questioned why a gen ed teacher, and our point was that most of our kids spend most of their day in general education settings. So it's really important to us that our general education colleagues are critical members of the team and feel comfortable providing some input in those meetings. We finished that training today. Today was the last day for teams, and we'll spend the rest of this year beginning implementation with some of the smaller components of the facilitated IEP meeting, and then we'll plan for full rollout over the course of next year. The other thing that we were going to do this year was work with UConn on the beginning of a special ed study. Unfortunately, the professor that we were working with got ill and was unable to complete that. But Key2Ed provided us with an alternative, certainly not a study, but a way of looking at what are the issues that are causing conflict between members of the special education community, meaning school parents and staff. And we have finished the second task force meeting last night. We have one more task force meeting in March, and then Key2Ed will be coming to the March Board of Ed meeting to share the entire process with you. I have to say it's been in some ways difficult and in other ways really rewarding. I think the task force is a really interesting, diverse group of people, and we've had some really good conversations, and I certainly appreciate the time and effort everybody's put into it. I'm not sure it was the pizza, but that may have been what brought them out. The other things that we're doing is that we are continuing, we initiated the Wellness Center this year. So what we did was we took the services and supports that are available throughout the high school and consolidated them in one place at the high school. And that includes our ESS, Effective School Solutions, clinical social work supports, our what used to be called the Comprehensive Support Program is now the classes in the Wellness Center that serve both gen ed and special ed students. And our thought was that if we consolidated the services, we could get some efficiency there, but also really start to do case conferencing on some of the more difficult students who present us with our most difficult challenges at the high school. About December, I got a phone call from South Dakota, where someone had been looking at the Wellness Center and asked if it was possible to come visit. Sure. But she said, well, maybe we'll just do a phone conference. I said, well, okay. So the reputation of the Wellness Center is getting out. It certainly is providing, I think, a more comprehensive wraparound service to our students with more significant challenges at the high school. We continue with our efforts to get students to participate in their IEP PPT meetings. Our goal is to have every student be a part of their meeting, to share what it is they think they need to learn, how their disability impacts them. We even have our preschoolers come to meetings. Some of them bring pictures, some of them make videos, some of them bring PowerPoints, but they talk about what they think they need to learn, what's hard for them, what's easy for them. And it really, I think, grounds the meetings in who we're talking about. The other change we made this year was we took what we had previously called our special ed coaches, who supported our new teachers and struggling teachers, and refocused them all to become a behavior support team in recognition of the fact, I think some of what you've heard tonight, that we are seeing students with more challenging behaviors. Certainly we're seeing more students with anxiety-related behaviors. So we redeployed our coaches to become a behavior support team. Each coach now has a school that they're assigned to. In the past, it used to be that they would get assigned as cases came in, which meant that you may have 2 or 3 coaches going to a single building, which was A, inefficient, and B, didn't really establish a relationship between the person and the school. So now our behavior coaches are all assigned to schools. We've gotten some really positive feedback from the model. They're also available to do workshops in the schools if they're asked. We continue to train teachers in Norton-Gillingham. We are one of the few districts that has the luxury of having a Norton-Gillingham fellow on staff. She trains a cohort every year of special ed, general ed, and literacy specialists who are continuing in that work. And the last part is just one of the feel-good things we do. We are one of the districts in Fairfield County that participates in Unified Sports, which is a sports program of typically developing peers and kids with disabilities on a single team. The high school has the largest program. They run 3 seasons, I believe, soccer, basketball, and track. And Western Middle School has a very robust unified sports team. So those are the highlights. Evaluation teams. Again, we are one of the only districts in at least Fairfield County, I'm not sure in Connecticut, that uses the evaluation team model. These are people who just do evaluations, and they do all of our initial evaluations. The good news is they become very familiar with the tests and the procedures. We have bilingual staff members as part of our evaluation teams, and they evaluate all students who are initially referred for special education. You see the evaluation team results for the district. The numbers that are not included in this report are our private school numbers. We do usually between 20 and 30 private school evaluations a year. We are responsible for doing the evaluations of any child who attends school in Greenwich, whether they are Greenwich residents or even actually Connecticut residents. The IDEA was changed years ago to include that as a requirement. And it also does not, and those numbers are not included in here. So we are seeing an increase in evaluations. We are also seeing a shift from school-based referrals to parent referrals. Our hypothesis is some of this actually has to do with the STAR assessment. I think sometimes when parents get test results back that seem to be incongruous with what they've been experiencing either through grades or something else, it somehow triggers for them something may be wrong and they need to investigate it. So we are seeing a shift to more parent referrals than staff, than school. You'll see that in the numbers. And we're also seeing a slight decrease in what we call the positive hit rate, or those kids who've been referred for evaluations who are actually entered into special education. That number is decreasing. Just as an aside, the state has determined that this year we will change the evaluation timeline. It used to be either 60 calendar days or 45 school days. They have gone to just 45 school days. The benefit to us will be that 60 calendar days used to sometimes take us into the summer, and we'd have to do summer evaluations. Now that we're only tied to the 45 school day calendar, it means that we will not be doing as many summer evaluations, since the timeline will stop at the end of school and pick up again when school begins. Typically, the disability categories that children are identified under have not changed dramatically. Learning disabilities is still our primary area. Service delivery, we staff schools using a staffing ratio, which is determined based on the hours of special education services that each student is mandated for on their IEP. And we look at the total number of hours of special ed only, not related services, and then create a ratio that goes out to the schools. It's not always a perfect number, and if it's not, we do some adjustments trying to get to full-time positions in every building. We have, at this point, as far as I can remember right now, we have no staff split between buildings. It's just very inefficient. It doesn't allow teachers to service students when they need those services all the time if they're moving between buildings, and you just lose time in the car. So we always try to have full-time positions in all of our buildings to the maximum extent possible. Staff are paid for in 3 ways. They are either paid for through the table of organization, they are paid for through a grant, primarily the IDEA grant, and then the third way is the Project Evolve model, which we continue to use in Greenwich. This comes out of the University of Vermont, which looked at the fact that our students with the most significant disabilities were tending to spend, and this is nationwide, most of their time with professional assistants. And how do we change that model? What we do school by school, year by year, is determine whether or not the school can trade in 3 professional assistant positions for 1 certified staff member. It increases access to a certified staff member, but it does impact on the number of paraprofessionals or professional assistants in the building. Again, that's not a lifelong commitment. Schools make that for the year, and at the end of the year, they decide whether or not they want to do it again based on the staffing ratio. Something that people brought up, which is an issue that we deal with every year, is that we set our staffing sometime in April or May, which is long before the school year starts, and changes happen between May and September, and then they continue to happen all year long. Kids get added, mostly added, and how do we account for that? I try to give each school at least a 0.2 or 0.3 cushion in the staffing so that it accounts for kids moving in. But we still sometimes get to schools where it's a struggle by the end of the year because we've added students and we do not add staff as the year goes on. And I gave you a staffing chart so you can see how that works. Our demographics have not changed dramatically. We are still probably about 2 to 1 boys to girls, which is not unusual That tends to be the ratio throughout the country for people with disabilities. We have not been cited for disproportionality in the past couple of years, so we are still within our natural proportions. And we have slipped a little in our time with non-disabled peers. The next section is the district annual performance report. Unfortunately, these reports always lag because they come from the state. A comment was made in one of the questions that we are low in our percentages. We continue to be on the low end of kids identified compared to other districts, but we are pretty stable across the year, although we are growing. Our certified personnel, we tend to have, and I know this is going to be hard to believe for people, we tend to have more staff than some districts because we have fewer kids outplaced. So we do serve a higher percentage of our students in district, which makes our staffing ratio a little bit, or the percentage of the budget that goes to staff higher than in other districts. Some of that has to do with the cost of our teachers and our salary schedule, but it also has to do with the fact that we hire staff because we keep more kids in district. We receive something called the annual performance plan, which shows our compliance with federal regulations. We continue to meet state guidelines in everything. Except the one thing that we didn't this year was we were making progress on our participation rate of secondary students in standardized testing. We met all of our proficiency rates for standardized testing. We met all of our goals for preschool, and actually we met everything, so good news. Our college outcomes were good. We actually saw a pretty significant increase of kids who went to four-year colleges this year who have IEPs. There are some examples of the schools that students went to, including Quinnipiac, Syracuse, Mitchell College, which has this very strong program for kids with disabilities. So kids are graduating and making good decisions about whether or not they want to go into college. The next section is IEP mastery data. We count every single objective that every student masters or doesn't master throughout the school year. We did see a couple dips this year in the percentage of students meeting goals, and I'm sure it really frustrated schools because I saw a lot more kids who mastered 79%. And I'm sure that's heartbreaking to a school because 80 is our cutoff. So you'll see some schools that had a smaller percentage of students meeting goal, but they did have a lot of students with 79%. And kudos to the preschool where every single student in the preschool program met 80% of their objectives or better. Overall in the district, that was the preschool section. Overall the district, we had 89% of the average 89% of mastery of goals and objectives, and 83% of the students met their 80% of their objectives. Next section is on
Mary,
the unfortunate section.
Given the essence of time, I think some of the board members, they want to stop and start asking questions.
Okay, want to stop now or just go through?
Yeah, I think go ahead and stop because I think they may have quite a few questions.
What? Go?
Yeah, we've got the report, so Ms. Hirsch.
The last section is just the procedural safeguards, and you can see that we compare somewhat favorably to other districts.
We read it.
But it's not. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to start off by saying thank you for getting back to us in a short window of time with some of the questions that were asked. I know a lot of those questions were ones that I had sent in before our last meeting with you a few weeks ago, so there should have been time to prepare a lot of those answers. So I would simply like to say I didn't get a chance to read the responses in depth because they came in right before our meeting. So I would like to, when we get to agenda planning, request that we add this back on again with the additional information that we received, especially considering the past 4+ years of monitoring reports that I've read through, included information that we didn't get in this one that I have requested about mediation and other school by school, grade by grade information. as I said, I'd like more details on the settlements over the past years. While it may not be the most costly in monetary terms, it's certainly the most costly area for our students and community in missed educational opportunities and emotional investments. So it's really important we learn about that. But I think I'd start with my question for you is in regards to the fact that I didn't see any note here about professional learning for special education of Gen Ed staff noted in the report. I'd really like some more information on how much time, how many hours and what programs our general education teachers are getting in professional learning in this department for de-escalation of students when we're talking about behavioral issues. I know Carol Sutton was up here talking about how Gen Ed teachers are having difficulty handling some situations in class and may need additional staff or training to support that.
We have two different models of professional learning, and I'll ask Irene to comment if she has any additional information. But on the days, the full days are really choice days. So we try to make sure on all choice days where there are different workshops available to staff that we have, this year the behavior support team people offered workshops on things such as behavior management, strategies for dealing with kids with anxiety. The psychologists, social workers, and guidance counselors have access to more in-depth training in those areas. And the behavior support people are available and have done workshops specifically at schools on areas related to behavior. Every school has something called an intensive intervention team, which is a crisis team is required by the state, but we already had a crisis team which dealt with crisis. So we renamed what they would call the crisis team the intensive intervention team, and all the members of that team are trained in PMT, physical management training, which, although it does definitely deal with physical management training, also deals with de-escalation strategies and ways of preventing behavior as opposed to dealing with the behavior when it happens.
Well, it seems to me, just from public comment and hearing from our teachers and parents, that this probably should not be just offered and on a choice day. This should be required for all of our teachers. But I do want to ask, one of the questions I'd asked was about our 3 evaluation teams for K-12 and the swing team that we've had in the past. And I noticed your response, it said that with the increased number of evaluation, the teams are struggling to complete requests within the timeline. It leads me to ask a follow-up question as to why we've not heard this before. If we don't have enough coverage to complete requests within the federally mandated timeline, and they are no longer able to attend evaluation meetings because they no longer have time, it really would seem that we should be looking into this. It shouldn't be the first time we've heard this issue.
No, it's not.
But more importantly than that, when we're talking about that, one of the other questions I had for you is, if you look back at the past, 5+ years of monitoring reports, you note that our staffing model has not been updated in 10 years. Now that would be at least 15. And it also seems to me that that's something that we should consider looking into. Considering, I know it has budgetary concerns, but I'd like to sort of see how that's being done. You're talking about hours, and there's one at every school, but it doesn't necessarily seem, for certain different staffing models.
The teacher staffing, we have not really changed the ratio dramatically over the past couple of years. We do discuss it every year towards this time of year at Director's Advisory with the assistant principals to see if there are other ways of staffing buildings in an equitable way. At this point, we haven't been able to come up with anything that we think is substantially better. We do look at the paraprofessional staffing or the professional assistant staffing differently every year. And we have changed a couple things in the couple ways that we look at the way we allocate PAs to buildings. What we found was that sometimes kids were getting special ed service hours added because the paraprofessionals were needed for things that were not necessarily directly related to goals and objectives, but the students did actually need additional support, usually for things like management in the building and things like that. So we changed the ratio and then added an allocation of paras based on the size of the building, that the building can use in ways that they think best meet the needs of the kids in the building, not necessarily directly related to the implementation of goals and objectives.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, thank you.
Mary, can you appreciate Peter recognizing me. I wanted to talk about this thing of paraprofessionals, because I need a point of information. Tell me exactly what a paraprofessional is and what their job is as it relates to special education.
They are actually, and I slip into this, their title is actually professional assistant. And they are there to assist in the implementation of the special education program for students.
Okay, so give me a really specific example of what they go for the sweet spot. What are they used for?
You may have a student who's been working on some attention goals with the psychologist, and they're developing strategies to keep themselves focused in the classroom. A paraprofessional may be in the classroom so that when the student starts to lose focus, they would remind them to use their strategy.
Is this typical? Is that the most typical example? I'm very familiar with paraprofessionals being there for kids who are particularly handicapped. Let's just call it, particularly handicapped. So that's a pretty typical implementation of a paraprofessional. I'm trying to think beyond that. There's a reason I'm going to ask this in a second, because I'm trying to connect it to the data that you provided.
To the
data that you provided. I'm trying to understand the connection of what a paraprofessional does, because they're not a certified teacher, right?
They should not be the person doing the direct instruction of the specially designed instruction that kids are getting on.
Is a speech specialist a paraprofessional?
No.
Is a reading specialist a paraprofessional?
No.
Okay. So Mary, the thing that I struggle with, and I think this is right? And I'm where Mrs. Hirsch is, right? Ms. Hirsch, I should say. Whatever. I know how to spell your name now properly, thank you. And by the way, I think our executive session, let me just underline this. I think our executive session, where, because we're the board, is the local education authority, and we delegate our authority down through the superintendent to teachers, because you guys have no authority on student data except through us. I thought it was remarkably helpful to have that session to dig into settlements and the rest of it. It was very illuminating. I found, and by the way, I want to thank you guys for doing it, it expanded my knowledge dramatically on this subject so that I could think, as one of 8 board members, in our role in policy, what adjustments we could do to help support the program. I hope, and I think there's a hunger for the board, I know there's a hunger of all of us, to dig into this much more deeply. It's like pulling on a string, and the more you pull, you just need to pull more. And this isn't going to change. So coming back to this, the thing and we had in that discussion, a discussion about delivery models and the most modern, effective way to deliver special education for efficacy for kids, right? It was about effectiveness. And it wasn't about compliance. I know you guys want to talk about compliance. The board doesn't want to talk about, the board wants everybody to be 100% compliant, but we don't want to talk about compliance. We want to talk about outcomes for kids. So I see here on page 14, right? This is a summary of special education in Greenwich Public Schools. We have 1,073 kids who are getting special education services. 969 of them are not pre-K. Okay, so these are people in what everybody else knows as elementary, middle, and high school, right?
And 12 plus.
And 12 plus, thank you very much. We have some kids at 12 plus, right? But that is broken out here. Then you have students by disability, right? Important data. Big categories. ADHD, right? It's called another health impairment. Speech and language impairment, right? Learning disabilities, which is dyslexia, which is, I know because we've asked for this before, because I asked for it before, I'd love to get it again. We had a chart in a prior report where it was broken down in more granularity exactly what the primary disability is, but this is close enough for government work. That's 400, 600, 800 kids who were in those 3 categories. Now, the thing that is an interesting crosswalk is time with disabled peers. It says essentially 80% or more, only 20% of their day, these are kids who are getting special education services. That number is also 800. So the vast bulk of students, according to this data, unless you could tell me otherwise, are kids that are not necessarily being served by paraprofessionals. What they need is, they need language, they need executive functioning, they need, your point was time on task, focus, so on and so forth. They need reading, intensive reading, because they have reading issues, they have coding issues. And by the way, they're not sitting around with a paraprofessional all day long. They're sitting in your regular classroom and they're pulled out, or maybe they got some intensive therapy along the way. The reason I say that is that it seems to me that, to Ms. Hirsch's point, most of this delivery is done not by paraprofessionals, not in separate rooms. It's being done by certified teachers. And then for us to have and I've seen our catalog on professional development, fair to say, the board has not been able to fund in that prior year. That's a decision that got made 1 year. Now the superintendent tells us, nope, it's okay. We don't need to put that funding back. We need to redo that program. But I've seen that catalog, and what jumps out in that catalog, it's like our high school catalog that we just put in. It's like a college catalog. It's like my son just called home and registered for his classes at UCLA for the next semester, and it's like, he's picking what to get. It seems to me, if we've got this is the punchline, if we've got most of this delivered by teachers, most of it delivered by regular teachers, against the vast bulk of things that we need, those teachers have to have mandatory training supplied to them in a really intensive way. And we don't need to wait for next year's review to figure something like that out. Now, I'm not a real smart guy. You might tell me otherwise. Hey, Peter, there's a bunch of information you're completely missing here. And I'd love to be educated more, as I said again. But it seems to me we have to take some actions if we're going to have this kind of program that get us maybe a little back to basics, get us a little more focused so we can deal with that. Now, by the way, I am heartbroken, and anybody who serves on this board is heartbroken to hear the story of, I'm sorry, I've forgotten her name, she's still here, to hearing about her daughter. That's a whole different class of child with a whole different set of very focused needs, and I know that in you guys spend a lot of time focusing on that, and we need to focus on that, because those are the kids who are the most vulnerable, most greatest in need. But while we're doing that, we can't highlight that and not focus on this 85% that's at the core of what jumps out of this page. Just tell me if I've read this wrong, or
No, but
is there something I'm missing?
Here's what I will tell you. I think one of the most positive moves we made was our move towards personalized learning. Because what personalized learning really at its core asks you to do is to look at each student individually and meet their needs as best you can. So when we're talking about providing different ways of learning, providing different ways of accessing information, all of that really does support students who learn differently in the classroom. So I think we are better than we've ever been at incorporating strategies for kids with disabilities into the content and instruction that we give our gen ed teachers. So for those large amount of students with what we refer to as the high incidence disabilities, learning disabilities, ADHD, speech and language, many of the teaching strategies that they need are good teaching strategies with which most of our gen ed teachers.
Well, I'm sorry, high incidence, you mean just there's a lot of kids who have it?
Yeah, it's a high end, there's a lot of them.
There's a lot of them.
As opposed to a low incidence disability like traumatic brain injury where we only have 2 or 3 kids with that disability. So I do think the answer to a lot of what you're asking is in how we support and train gen ed teachers for all kids. Because there are kids who are slow readers who are not in special ed, that if you give other options in the classroom, all kids benefit. I think what you're referring to, and we struggle with, are those kids with the more significant disabilities whose learning is dramatically different than other kids. And yeah, we would love to have more time for professional learning just around those kids. I will tell you that the one thing that came out of our task force meeting last night was time is our biggest resource and our biggest enemy in some cases. It's where do we get the time? You know, when you're changing to NGSS new science standards, you've got a teacher who's got to learn the new science standards. We sometimes get in those positions of where do I